Good evening, everyone. This December 6th, 2022 meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now in order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck.
Here.
Councilors in Boot.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
Wynn.
Here.
Rapp.
Here.
And Councilors Verdict and Mans are excused.
Thank you, Ms. Linder. Now, everyone, will you please stand, remove your hats, and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we are going to start this evening with a fun presentation awarding the winners of this year's annual photo contest. This is the 14th annual photo contest, and I know many of you had a chance to see the winning photographs displayed outside of Council Chambers in the foyer there. So I'm going to ask the winners who are here present to come forward into the horseshoe, and then we'll have a chance to share on the slides with everyone here your winning photographs and recognize you. So I'm going to call up this year's winners. I'm going to use your first names so that I don't butcher your last ones. We have Matthew, Beth, Brian, Abby, Maddie, Gail, Larice, Jackie, Luca, Jerry, and then not with us, but I'm going to call your names just in case you are here. Bella, Emily, Jen, Sharon, Nick, Ian, and Abby. Welcome to you all. Councilor Wendland is going to help us give out the awards tonight. Oh, wow. And we even have one of the subjects here. Okay. Get my notes in order here. So when I call you, you just you can step forward here, and then we're going to talk about your piece here. Okay. So let's see. The first, now Nick is not here though, but Nick is actually one of our firefighters, and he took this picture of his colleague, Alexa. And this took first place in the Life in LO category. Okay. And then our next, Abby, also not here, correct? Abby's unfortunately not here, but this, her photograph taken at the 4th of July parade took second place. Okay. Now Beth, and I know Beth is here. Beth. Okay, now Beth, this is not your first time winning.
Yes, it is my first time here.
Oh, it is your first time here, but not your first time winning. Okay, well, welcome and congratulations. So Beth has 2 winning photographs, and this is the first that took 3rd place in the Life in LO category entitled Friday Night Lights, and then Autumn in Lake Oswego. And Beth, this is your daughter, yes, correct? And dog. And the dog's name is Emma, right? Yes, okay. And this is not, so Beth had a number of these 2 winning photographs. You lived in LO for 3.5 years. And the football photo was taken at the high school at its first game of the season. And your son is a senior on the football team. Is that your son in the photograph? Oh, it is your son in the photo? Oh, it's a very good picture. Okay, okay. Oh, congratulations to you. Thank you. Give her a round of applause. Oh, can you get your goodie bag? Jackie. Congratulations. This is not your first time. I know we got many repeat talent here tonight. So this is Jackie's photograph, Wooden Bridge at George Rogers Park, and this takes first place in the Places in Lake Oswego category. And you had your first winning photograph in 2010. Wow, very good. And you've lived in the Westlake neighborhood for 33 years. No, over 30. And have been you worked as an educational assistant at the Lake Grove Elementary School for decades. Well, you're still there. And you're still there.
I'm subbing.
You're subbing. Well, very good. Well, congratulations on this photo. It's wonderful. Good job.
You've slimmed down.
Thank you, Jackie. That's great. Okay. And Jen not here. But Jen's photograph, Deep Roots, where business park meets nature. This is on along Meadows. I believe, and this took second place in the places in LO. Jen also, is this the piece though? Honor Guard. This is a different piece. Typo. This is not Jen's. This is not Jen's. We'll skip this. Okay. Oh, it is Jen's. Oh, but the name is wrong. Okay. And Gail. Is Gail? Gail, yeah. Oh, but you're here for, oh. And so who are you?
I'm her friend.
Oh, what is your name?
Becky.
Okay. Well, Gail, she took third place in the Places of Lake Oswego category, and this is As Night Falls, and this was taken at Mercado Grove back in January. So congratulations to Gail, and thank you, Becky, for receiving the award on her behalf. All right. Good job. Another, I think Bella's a repeat winner. Yes. Bella is with, we all know Bella. Bella took, he's not able to be here tonight, but he took first place. I wonder if this is this Bella on the board? This is Bella on the board. Wow, so kind of like a selfie. Okay, he won with the selfie. Well, good job to Bella. We wish he could be here tonight, and we extend our congratulations to Bella for his first place photograph. Larice. Yes. Oh, congratulations. So Larice took second place in the positive aging category, and one of these hands is your hand. Is your hand, correct? And you're a caregiver, and you took this with one of your clients.
My ladies, yeah.
One of your ladies. Well, congratulations. It's a beautiful piece. Thank you. I want to say that Larice moved to Lake Oswego just last year from Kenmore, Washington. Her husband works at Lewis and Clark, and you're originally from New Hampshire. And you're the lady in the photograph is 92 years old. It's wonderful.
Big in all of the events around here. I didn't know that until afterwards, that she was highly involved in the city council and a lot of the arts. She was an artist, and she did many things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Congratulations to you. Wonderful photograph. Thank you. Matthew, congratulations. So Matthew's photograph, this is bath time. It took first place in the plants and wildlife category. This does remind me of what my dogs do to each other on a nightly basis. Matt has lived in Lake Oswego since 2018. And you grew up in Westland. And you went to Our Lady of the Lake? Yes. Oh, so did I. Yes, wonderful. Yes, it's a great, yes, I know. Westland High School, this was taken in your backyard. Right, and in the February, where after the February 2021 ice storm, the fence came down, and then you had deer roaming. Wonderful, okay. And you have not put it back up. He has seen 2 summers of various doe, fawn, and a few bucks, but not this buck, in his backyard. And his dad, Michael, is also a past photograph winner, so congratulations. Wonderful, thank you so much. Okay, Jerry, congratulations. Another plants and wildlife. Jerry has second place with this very cute raccoon. Looks so innocent. You never know. Like he went straight from here to your trash can. That's right. Jerry has lived in LO for 28 years, and also in the Westlake area, and worked in marketing for Intel, and now has a small business where he creates electronic tools for high school athletes who wanted to be recruited to play sports in college. One reason Jerry and his family enjoy living here is the menagerie of urban wildlife in their backyard, including, and you have named this raccoon. Rocky. Oh, this is Rocky, the raccoon, and he pays you regular visits. Wonderful. The whole family. Oh, yeah, I know. Where there's one, there's others. Congratulations. Thank you, Jerry.
Do you have any problem running that?
Now, a third place winner, Sharon, is unable to be here tonight, but her photograph, Fledgling House Finches, took third place in this category. And it's a beautiful, Sharon is a past winner as well, and she won also. This is the one, Ready, Set, Kayak, which took first place in the digitally altered images category. So we extend our congratulations to Sharon and wish she was here tonight. Okay. Brian. Where did she go? Okay. I thought she was on the dais. So this is pancakes at George Orwell. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, this must have been taken at the pancake breakfast. But the dog's name is Pancakes. This is Pancakes. So how did you name it how did you name her Pancake?
She's pancake batter colored.
Because she is the color of pancake batter, okay. And that is accurate, yes. So Pancakes is 10-year-old, blonde / pancake colored, long hair, miniature, Dachshund. Pancake was born outside of Salem in 2012 and lived with her 2 loving caretakers in downtown Portland before moving to Lake Oswego last fall, and we are certainly glad to have Pancake here. Pancake surprisingly spends most of her time snoozing the day away and assisting her parents with work and various projects around the house, and of course monitoring squirrels and perhaps Rocco outside. And so if we were to ask Pancakes what she loves most about her new hometown, she would tell you that it has the best parks to explore, excellent restaurants, and very good donuts. That is wonderful. Okay. Brian actually works for HUD and has been working with the city on increasing the supply of affordable housing. So we are glad to have Brian and Pancakes here in the community. Congratulations. Thank you. And Emily, my partner Katie, this is her favorite photograph. She thought this should have been, like in its own category, first place. Cat lover. Pasha loves catnip. This is 3rd place in the pets category. Unfortunately, Emily is not able to be here, but this is Emily's 7-year-old cat, Pasha, who is sitting in a pot of catnip. Wonderful, very cute. Okay. Yes. Maddie. Hi, congratulations. So Mandy, this is a photograph of your rabbit, Minky, the Netherland dwarf rabbit. And you took first place in the youth category, which is a big deal. How old are you?
I'm 11.
11. And where do you go to school?
Lake Grove.
Excellent school. And you're in the 5th grade. I understand that you have played on the Lake Oswego Little League softball team for the past couple of years, as well as Lake Oswego soccer, Lake Oswego youth basketball teams, and you love to play outside and explore the numerous and diverse parks with friends. Great activities. And you also love photography. And after taking a remote learning class during the pandemic, you learned this new skill, which is fantastic. How old's Minky?
She's 6.
6. She's very cute, and congratulations to you. It's a wonderful photograph. Thank you. Thanks, Maddie. And Luca, congratulations, Luca. So Luca, your photograph took 2nd place in the youth category, and this is the flower and the butterfly. And will you tell us where you took this?
It's at Lusher Farm. There's a mural at the kids' garden. The flower was there, and I just thought it was a great photo opportunity.
It's a very good photo opportunity. And tell us how old you are and what school you go to.
I'm 11, and I go to Palisades.
Wonderful. And it says here that you enjoy photography because there's so much that you can do with a photo. You can share an idea, tell a story, or just share a cool photo that you took. And that's very well said. Congratulations again. Okay. And finally, 3rd place winner in the youth category was taken by Ian Lee. Ian's unable to be here, but Ian is a high school student at LOHS. He's been here for 5 years, and he did a great job with this photograph as well. You all did a great job. Thank you all so much for participating in this contest, for your love of the community, for taking the time to participate in this way. And we will be using these photographs all throughout City Hall, on the website, and all the different things that we send out throughout the entire year. So everyone, please give these folks another round of applause, and congratulations to you all. Hey, thank you all very much. Thank you. What year did you go to Lakewood? In I think like mid-90s I would have graduated.
80 to 88.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah. Okay. Just give 1 second for his folks on here. So next, we're going to have public comment, and some of you have been here for public comment before, and you know the deal, but for those of you that have not, just real quickly, when I call your name, please come forward. We're glad to have everyone who is here for public comment. We have a limit of 30 minutes on the agenda for this, so hopefully we'll be able to get to folks, but we may not get to everyone. When it's your turn to speak, we'll have the lights. You have 3 minutes. Just please pay attention to the lights. It will kind of tell you how your time progress is going. Okay, so first up, I have Bill Waters. So Bill, please come forward.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Bill Waters. As a professional counselor, I've worked in the field of mental health for over 40 years. Over the past several months, you have heard people telling you that pickleball noise is negatively impacting their mental health. On the flip side, you have heard from a much larger group that playing pickleball has definitely positively impacted their mental and physical health. In fact, your Parks and Rec Task Force survey indicated that over 500 people completed, showed a score of 4.2 out of 5 possible that they play pickleball to improve their overall well-being. And the way in, I found that your publication indicates that pickleball is a way to live well and play in LO. I applaud you for listening carefully to people representing both sides of this contentious issue. But as a city council, you can only do so much to address any individual's emotional health. We all need to care for our own mental health. In line with your charge, the sound disturbances were minimized. Under your oversight, LO Parks and Rec solved the problem in an effective and compassionate manner. You have videos in your possession to demonstrate this fact. When it comes to decide whether or not to keep pickleball courts in George Rogers Park, keep them open, I urge you to come to a decision that is in concert with your mission statement. Cultivate an exceptional quality of life for everyone in your community. Keep the pickleball courts in George Rogers Park open for the enhancement of our community and for the enjoyment and health benefits of all. Doing anything less sets a terrible precedent. I live directly across from Millennium Park. What if 4 of my neighbors and I came to you and told you the noise created by the farmers market and the summer bands that play there often were causing us to experience emotional problems? Would you immediately decide to cancel the band events and the farmers market for 6 months, including all next summer, to study the issue? Would you construct a locked fence around the park? Would you begin to look for other sites to hold the farmers market and music events? Would you restrict the hours of the market and limit the number of social events held in the park? I wouldn't expect that you would take any of these actions. The rights, the enjoyment, and the positive impact on the mental and physical health of a large number of people who enjoy Millennium Park would outweigh my and my 4 neighbors' issues. Please consider this when making this important decision about the future of pickleball in George Rogers Park.
Thank you, Mr. Waters.
Thank you.
Thank you. Martha Schrader. Hi, Commissioner. It's good to have you.
Well, it's nice to be here. Usually I'm on the other side of the, of the dais. But I'm not here in my commissioner capacity this evening. I am part of the Evergreen neighborhood on 5th Street, and I know, colleagues, that you're aware we are having a severe stormwater issue, and it really is, I know you all know, it is the most significant source of water pollution essentially in our state, not just our city, and also in our county. Pollutants, silt, oil, chemicals, trash, and pesticides from storm drains and drainage ditches to the nearest creek, stream, or wetland. It can harm fish and aquatic life and threaten our drinking water. And I have, since I've lived here since 2012, I will tell you I've seen a significant increase in an issue at the end of our street. And at the behest of my friends and neighbors, I did call you, Mayor Buck, just to give you a heads up, and I did talk to Daniel, that I wanted to make you aware I was just going to come tonight at their behest to let you know that it really is not a safe, healthy environment right now, and I honestly believe it's threatening the health and safety of the folks on our street. My other concern is as we're dealing with climate change, these incidents of this heavy rain in short periods of time, I believe it's kind of been fine for a long time there. But I think because we're experiencing these differences in those weather patterns with rain dumping at inches and inches that we've never experienced before, it's exacerbated that problem. And it is difficult for me to come before you. I view all of you as friends and colleagues. And I'm just here to ask if, as you go through your capital improvement plan on behalf of my friends and neighbors, that you might consider moving this project up on the list a little further. I do think it's significant. We're seeing property damage. My neighbors have been very unhappy and upset. I have told them I'm a commissioner, not a city councilor, but I am here tonight on their behalf. And let me say something, as actually your county commissioner here. Listen, I understand this is difficult for you because of resources, because of having a plan in place, making changes in the middle of probably a plan that's been on the books for a while. I have also been in your position at the county level to be in that position and consider those options. So I am well aware for you and for Martha, this is not an easy job. It's a hard decision, but I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel that my neighbors are truly suffering from this. And I will tell you, I am in the same boat that you are, because tomorrow, this is what my homework will be tonight, because as you know, we also have water and environment services in our county. I am the liaison to that group as part of the advisory board, and we will be looking at our SIP, our improvement plan tomorrow. It's a 5-year.
We don't want to delay your preparation.
Pardon me?
We don't want to delay your preparation.
I know you don't. I'll be quick. It is a 5-year wastewater SIP of $192 million. And the projected cost of the 5-year surface water SIP is $9.2 million. So you do know, as a fellow elected official and a colleague, I do understand what you're dealing with. But if you could in any way help my neighbors, my friends with this, because I do believe it is affecting our quality of life in my neighborhood. So with that, thank you. And yes, I did tell you, Mayor Buck, I would say you're the best city council I ever worked with, okay?
Are we not your favorite city council?
So if that will help move you along in any decision-making, I would actually appreciate that. And also, if you look at my CLACCO, one of our biggest pieces in our issue this go-around, and for my neighbors as well, is what we do with surface water in Clackamas County. And anything I can do to help move anything along, Martha, I know we've spoken to each other. I appreciate it. So thank you.
Commissioner Schrader.
Thank
We
you for
appreciate you
your
being here.
time.
Thank you. Larry Kitchen, you are up next. Hi, Mr. Kitchen. Good evening.
Hello, my name's Larry Kitchen. I'm on the board and the treasurer of the Arts Council of Lake Oswego. I'm commenting on the proposed staff changes to the 1.5% approval process in Section 5 of the Public Art Guidelines and the proposed naming policy for the city of Lake Oswego. The proposed changes in the approval process for the 1.5% program add 3 steps where city council approval is required, in addition to the approval of the Arts Council or the selection committee set up by the Public Art Guidelines. The Arts Council believes these changes can be made to work However, we are concerned that the proposed changes will slow the process, impact the willingness of volunteers to participate in the selection process, and negatively impact the willingness of artists to participate in Lake Oswego's public art program. The naming policy. The staff has proposed that the city adopt a naming policy that applies to all city facilities, expanding on the existing policy that applies to parks and recreation facilities. Their proposal would make all public art acquired by the city subject to the naming policy. The proposal as drafted may unintentionally apply this policy to all gallery without walls works. Staff has stated that their intent is only to apply the policy to the 1.5% projects. Artists name their works submitted to the gallery without walls as a standard practice. The process would not be able to conform to the proposed policy. Any decision to apply a naming policy to public art must clarify that it doesn't apply to the 2-year loans of Gallery Without Walls artwork to make that process work. The ACLO requests that you exclude public art from any citywide naming policy. Our research shows it's a common practice of cities with public art programs to exclude public art from naming policies. For example, the city of Tacoma excludes, quote, public art installations that have been commissioned or accessioned with a title that serves as the name of a piece. A similar exclusion has been Lake Oswego's practice to date. Naming a piece of art is part of the artistic process. We're concerned about Lake Oswego's ability to obtain artist participation if naming of a piece is separated from the artistic process. The second question to the council regarding depicting identifiable individuals in public art creates a large degree of uncertainty. Identifiable people is a subjective term, since all people are identifiable to someone, but only to a limited group. When is a person an identifiable person, or just a model used by the artist to illustrate an idea? Trying to write guidelines that will lead the council down a rabbit hole. It is better to let the council review discrete proposals if that is how you choose to spend your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kitchen. Okay, next is Valerie Jaster.
Evening.
Good evening.
My name is Valerie Jaster. It is actually my home on 5th Street that floods. And I am here tonight because I don't know that you all know the true impact that this has on my home, on my family, and on my neighborhood. I believe that you all might have been told that this is just a muddy front yard and maybe standing water, but it's not. I am literally the face of what failing infrastructure looks like. My home has flooded every year for the past 3 years from the stormwater facility in 5th Street. It is a literal flood, waterfall, thousands and thousands of gallons flows on my neighbor's property and mine. It inundates our home with dirty, diseased water. It has made my animals sick. It has scared my children. Their homes are on the bottom floor, and they're afraid that their bedrooms are going to flood. We call the city every time our home floods, and actual wonderful people from the engineering department always come out, but they always tell us there's nothing that they can do. This project has actually been approved by you all, and we are simply asking for you to fund it as soon as possible. We cannot wait until 2028, 29. I cannot sell my home. I cannot get a contractor to improve my home because no one can guarantee a project against continual flooding. We are simply begging you. We have tried to manage the water. We have 5 sump pumps on our property. 2 are industrial. The water flows from Fifth Street through our pipes along our now failing foundation of our home, and the water goes to the next stormwater facility. Our home has become a part of the neighborhood's stormwater management system. I have lived here my whole life. My grandparents bought this home in the 70s after they moved from Potter Street, which was named after my grandfather, off of Blue Heron. My grandparents were educators. My mother was an educator. I want my children to grow up here, but I am now being faced with the choice between selling my home for nothing or walking away from it and not giving my children the life that I want. I am asking, I'm actually begging, that you all please consider making this project a priority in your next fiscal year. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Jester. Bill Tierney. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Bill Tierney. As a bit of background, I am on the selection committee for the art here in City Hall, as well as for the Gateway piece on Highway 43. I'm a former past president and board member of the Arts Council of Lake Oswego and had the privilege a long time ago of sitting in your chair as member of City Council. So I appreciate you taking the time. You know, we live in a special community. I was going to tell you about how many pieces of sculpture I passed on my short drive from Westview Circle to City Hall, but I can't because it was dark. But you know and I know there are a lot of pieces of beautiful art on our streets and in our buildings, and it makes Lake Oswego a special place. It didn't happen by luck. It happened by investment on the part of the community, you and previous city councils and staff, and it also happened from a partnership and a trust between the city staff, city council, and organizations like the Public Art Committee, the Arts Council of Lake Oswego, and others, including the Lakewood Center. That partnership and trust is why we're flourishing today. Informally, all our activity is covered by a 28-page public art guidelines, 28 pages. I've worked under that. I've read it and reread it. And underlying that document, I believe, is that the council has said we will find people in this community who are professionally knowledgeable and dedicated to this community to maintain and develop our art collection. That partnership and trust is critically important. You'll be reviewing tonight, during your study session, a naming policy. Public art does not belong in that naming policy. But a situation occurred, which my understanding has been resolved by council, leading to a staff recommendation modifying, as Larry said, section 5.13 of the approval process. It modifies it in 3 places. The first is during the RFP, or development of scope phase. And I have to point out, as I did in an email to staff, that the staff was dealing with using an outdated public art guidelines, and that section, the first section, had been modified in negotiations with the Arts Council a few years back, and it's already covered. The other 2 sections give you, in essence, unilateral decisions on the art in this community. That's a bad idea. Our success has been based upon the partnership and trust, and going forward, if you don't make the change, we'll continue to have that partnership and trust. I see a blinking light, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tierney. Kent Watson. Good evening, Mr. Watson. Welcome.
This is my first time in here. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Mayor and City Council, my name is Kent Watson. My family and I have lived in Lake Oswego since 1999. Thank you for allowing me to talk this evening. I've spent my entire professional life in the book and publishing business. Over the years, I've actively donated more than 2,000 books to the Lake Oswego Public Library. I joined the Lake Oswego Public Library Advisory Board in 2021 to help bring a new library vision to the residents. I'm currently chair of the committee. This evening, Lake Oswego Library Director Melissa Kelly will present community visioning on the facility needs for the Lake Oswego Public Library project. Libraries offer everything from direct access to librarians for help in finding, reading, and research materials, story time for kids, teen lounges, senior citizen events, author presentations, and readings. The modern library is more than a container for books. 21st century libraries allow for distinct benefits and experiences for each user. Offerings can include tool libraries, maker spaces, podcasting centers, business incubators, cafes, and of course, coffee. As our climate changes, libraries can act as a cooling center, a warming center, a community resource for power outages and Wi-Fi. While these are ideas that many of us on the Lake Oswego Library Board envision, we've not heard from the community and their needs. During tonight's City Council meeting, Melissa Kelly will detail the specifics of the library visioning plan. I'm personally happy to speak for the Library Advisory Board and state that all of us here are here to help envision the Lake Oswego Library of the future. We want to engage with the diversity of residents in Lake Oswego and ensure that the city is meeting the 21st century needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. Jeff Harris. Good evening, Mr. Harris.
I'm Jeff Harris. Good evening. I live at 101 5th Street. Hope that address is sounding familiar at this point. I live next to the Jasters, and I live 4 doors down from Martha Schrader. In a staff report dated 11/17/21, it mentioned that the water project proposed by the city could be considered for funding in early 2023. And in a conversation some weeks ago with Stefan Brodus, I learned that approved SIPs would be discussed and prioritized for funding by the City Council early next year. And that's why we're here, and some of our neighbors are here, to urge you to treat the essentially complete lack of stormwater management on 5th Street with the urgency that it deserves. You know, as a reformed Californian living in Oregon since 2006, I used to enjoy the rain. However, now I dread it. On May 2nd of this year, a heavy rainstorm completely flooded our street, our yard up to the front door, and our neighbor's side yard within inches of their windows. A frantic call brought the fire department with industrial pumps, and over the next 4 to 5 hours, by their estimation, they pumped 30,000 gallons of stormwater from the side of their house onto Lake Bay Court. Never wanting to repeat that again, in June of this year, we hired Mr. Greg Weston of 3J Consulting to assess our situation. And his report, dated 7/25 of this year, and you will be getting this report if you don't have it already, stated, quote, "There is an area of approximately 127,000 square feet, or 2.92 acres, that creates runoff untreated and undetained, which flows south on 5th Street between Evergreen Road and the last house, 101 5th Street. Subsequently, the untreated runoff, which settles into the Harris and Jaster properties, contains a thick, muddy sludge, which the property owners are left to remove." You will be getting this in your packet from Mr. Weston, but I just want to show you the blue is the area that drains onto Fifth Street and then runs unabated to the end of the street, where it meets the railroad track right in front of our house. So, and I actually did a little bit of measuring. Well, no time for that. Okay. Basically, I want to say it's just really not okay to have 3 acres worth of untreated stormwater runoff to end up at my house and my neighbor's house. And we really can't wait till 2029, as Martha said. So I urge you to fund the current SIP to get this fixed before there's more expensive and unnecessary property damage, or actually someone gets hurt navigating our flooded street. So all of us, and there are many more that are not here, but have written you a note, that would urge you to fund this project. And I do thank you and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I appreciate you being here. Rob Mogenthal? I'm so sorry. Good evening. How do you say your? Mogenthal. Good evening, sir.
So, Rob Mogenthal, 104 5th Street. I live across 5th Street from the Jasters and the Harrises. Luckily, it's on a slightly elevated piece. But I have seen the situation happen over and over. We've lived in our house for 25 years. And the water pooling issue has always been a problem after a heavy rain. The single dry well that is at the edge of my property fills up and begins to flood the street, sometimes covering the railroad track warning that is painted onto the road, and frequently eliminating parking spots along 5th Street. The staff report mentions the new house built on the property in 2009 as a contributing factor, but there's no mention of the 3 new homes built on 5th Street in the block just to the north and what effect they may have had as a contribution. There isn't a single water runoff drain on 5th Street from Evergreen down to Lake Bay Court. The water must cross Lake Bay Court before any collection occurs. Contrast that with 6th Street, where there are 3. So similar length of street, similar slope, I would imagine. Something's off. So the staff report of 10/7/21 lists 3 interim possible solutions. Unfortunately, all are placed on the responsibility of the property owners. The affected area on the west side of 5th is in the city right away. This is where the accumulation begins. There's a large gravel area that could be used to enlarge the existing dry well without crossing the railroad tracks. A very simple, to my thought, solution. Now, the real solution is to expedite the project. But in reading through the report, I wasn't so sure that was happening. So I was just suggesting there are other avenues. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming here. Judy Harris.
Harris is here tonight.
There are some relatives.
All right, I'm going to apologize because I'm going to read this because I know I have 3 minutes, and so I don't want to go over that time. So I apologize for that. I'm Judy Harris, 101 5th Street, and neighbor to the Jasters at 490 Lake Bay Court. Thank you for this opportunity to be heard by you this evening. I'm here to plead for funding for the 5th Street Stormwater Project. Here are 5 facts. You may know these, but I want to say them. First, the city of Lake Oswego is responsible for providing functioning, adequate stormwater management to our neighborhoods. We pay a stormwater fee on our water bill every month, but don't personally benefit from stormwater management at 101 Fifth, nor do our neighbors. Next, every drop of water, rainwater that lands on our property is being properly ameliorated on our property. The issue is that nearly 3 acres of neighborhood stormwater runs down Fifth Street and flows through our front yard. Next, this is a public health and safety issue. Public health and safety issue that affects hundreds of Lake Oswego residents who use this street for walking, cycling, and driving. And all of the Cabana Lane houses use Fifth Street as their only access to their homes. When the street is filled with water, it is dangerous. Next, there is increasing concern about the toxicity of the untreated neighborhood water containing chemicals, metals, and animal waste. This untreated neighborhood water runs through our front yard and eventually runs into our neighbor's yard, causing massive damage. And the final fact, this problem is getting worse, partially because of the less permeable streets and residents above us, but also with climate change, which is bringing much more intensity to the rain events happening year-round. So I just would like to say 3 final comments. First, aside from the hazards of navigating through the murky, filthy sludge that remains from the neighborhood runoff, I have increasing concerns about the toxicity of living in untreated, polluted neighborhood waters that regularly flow through our outdoor living space. I'm trying to lower my toxic load from environmental contaminants, not increase it. Second, the irony of this situation does not escape me. Here we are in this beautiful, brand new city hall. And yet, just 3 blocks away from this building, it looks like a third world country with 125 sandbags on and around our property. These have become a permanent part of the landscape until the city fulfills its responsibility. And lastly, just human to human, with each one of you, I want to share with you the sense of dread that came over me with this winter with the first rainfall. Here we go again, never-ending anxiety, worry, and damage to our properties. Over the last 2 years, this problem has been well documented with scores of emails, letters, pictures, videos, and pleas for help. I implore you to do something about this now. As soon as possible, please fund this project. I appreciate your service to our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for public comment tonight. I know many of you wrote in. It's a great way to provide your public comment. Everyone that sent comments has been included on the record, posted to the website, included with this meeting. We thank all of you for coming tonight. We're going to move now to the consent agenda. Of note, we've removed item 6.3 from the consent agenda, and we'll consider that shortly. I'll ask for a motion to adopt the consent agenda, which includes Resolution 22-41. This is a resolution of the City Council adopting the Lake Oswego-Tigard Water Amended and Restated Intergovernmental Agreement regarding water supply facilities. Councilor Mans and I worked with Tigard on putting that together. Ordinance 2919, which is an ordinance of the City Council amending Ordinance 2907 to correct a scrivener's error in the legal description of 16085 Southwest Invery Road, which is a part of AN 22-0010. Then we have the authorization of the city manager to sign a professional services contract with Sensor in the amount of $1,031,689 for engineering services for the Lakeview Boulevard Street and Drainage Improvement Project. That's work order 333. We have approval of meeting minutes from September 20th, 2022, and we have the 2022 City Council Goals third quarter update.
Move to remove the code amendment regarding LOC.
No.
Is it, no. Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Yes. I second that, sir.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0. Okay. Now we come to items removed from the consent agenda. This is Ordinance 2917, an ordinance of the City Council clarifying, revising, and updating various provisions of the Lake Oswego Code. I'll move that we remove the code amendment regarding LOC 12.02.060 from Ordinance 2917, it's Exhibit 1, and the reference to it in the second whereas clause. Read Ordinance 2917 by title only for first reading and place the second reading on the December 20th, 2022 council meeting agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. And all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0, and I'll read Ordinance 2917 for its first reading by title only. An ordinance of the Lake Oswego City Council clarifying, revising, and updating various provisions of the Lake Oswego Code other than LOC Chapter 50, 2022. Okay. And now we have the consent agenda. This is for councilors only. We're going to be making, this is Resolution 22-40. This is approving an appointment to the Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resource Advisory Board. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 22-40?
Move to adopt the 2240.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 4-0. I'll thank Christopher Duncan for his service on the Parks Board, and welcome to the Parks Natural Resource Advisory Board, Jason Dorn. Appreciate you all. Okay, and with that, we are going to come to our public, or our one and only public hearing tonight, and this is on Resolution 22-29. This will be a resolution of the City Council establishing, revising, and updating fees and charges for 2023. And we have Sean. Oh, yeah. Thanks. Well, he's always so long-winded. We'll start with a review of the hearing procedure by our City Attorney Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a legislative decision, which is a policy decision within the discretion of the City Council. The public hearing process will begin with a presentation by staff. Testimony will then be received from the public. Individuals will have up to 5 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed for 10 minutes. The time does not include time spent responding to questions from the council or responses to the questions, and any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case shall the testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Do any councilors need to declare a financial conflict of interest?
No.
No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. You may pursue the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor Buck and councilors. My name is Sean Cross. I'm the finance director. A couple weeks ago, we had a study session on master fees and charges. We had a discussion. There were a couple questions, but no changes to the actual document itself. So I don't really have a presentation, but I'm here for any kind of questions you might have.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Director Cross? No? Okay. Well, with that, I'll just, we don't, I believe, have anyone signed up to testify. But is there anyone here that would like to testify? I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to testify on master fees and charges. Okay. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there a motion
to adopt Resolution 22-29?
Second.
Second, all right, and now discussion. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Director Cross.
Thank you. Well, we should have Director Cross at least read a page or something. No. It's only 900 pages long, so.
Okay, now we have a few study sessions tonight. The first item, 10.1, is the community visioning on the facilities needs of the Lake Oswego Public Library. And joining us for that discussion is Director Melissa Kelly and Ruth Metz of Ruth Metz Associates. Good evening to you both. Good to have you here. Now, I believe we also have members of the Barry Dunn consulting team on the Zoom. Okay.
Yes. Not sure if they will come up on the screen.
Okay.
But they're very happy that they're here, and I'll introduce them. Well, thank you, Mayor Buck and councilors. It's a pleasure to be before you this evening. My name is Melissa Kelly, and it's my honor to be our city's library director. And again, an honor to be before you today and to introduce our consultant group. We are very pleased to be working with Barry Dunn, and with us today, we have Ruth Metz from Ruth Metz Associates, and she's a library subject matter expert working with the Barry Dunn team. And also virtually joining us, we have J.R. Clanton, who's a senior project manager and consultant, as well as Jason Genk, who is the engagement manager for Barry Dunn. So they'll be able to help answer any questions that you may have. Okay. Well, I first want to start by introducing the study session and why we're here today to talk about this. So community visioning for the library is part of a broader strategic planning effort for the library. And it's broader than just studying the needs of the facility. We need to take a wider look at residents' needs and vision and expectations for library services to make sure we're positioned to provide for their 21st century library needs. And the role of library services and the services that are offered by the library have changed drastically in the 40 years since our building was constructed. Libraries at that time were designed primarily to store collections, whereas today's libraries are vibrant, bustling community centers filled with activity, filled with community members engaging, learning, creating, and connecting with each other. And the spaces that are needed to support those 21st century needs differ. And as you know, our library is very beloved in the community. The community is very active and engaged with the library, as you can see from some of our recent statistics here. And considering the documented history of our facilities needs, which we'll talk about a little bit more, as well as the 2021 community survey results that again emphasized needs relative to the library, you all set a council goal in 2022 to begin a process to address those long-term facilities needs, which the engagement plan we'll talk about tonight seeks to address. And again, I'm really excited to be here before you today to discuss the public engagement process. But before we go into that, I just want to really briefly recap our facilities history for folks that may not know that information. In 1974, a 35,000 square foot library was approved by voters, and in 1983, a 27,100 square foot library opened that we're still enjoying today. By the late 1980s, a group of citizens, I believe this was a council-approved task force, found that the facility had already been maxed out for its size. And in the 1990s and throughout the 2000s, there were multiple studies that again found that a larger facility or an addition of a branch library would be needed to meet community needs. And unfortunately, in 2012, we had a failed bond measure. Of course, we want to follow the direction of the community, and so we regrouped and continued to think about how we could meet the community's needs. And in the time from 2012 to present, the Library Advisory Board goals continued to prioritize finding a solution to facilities needs. And again, the 2021 community survey identified those needs as well. 69% of respondents were very supportive or somewhat supportive of expanding library facilities, amenities, and services in the future. Residents also told us to emphasize the library as a hub of community information and gathering, events and services for children, and the quality of the Lake Oswego Public Library facility. And items 1 and 2, I think, are somewhat related to the facility as well. And I must say, forgive me, but the library ranked #1 in resident satisfaction in that survey.
What was that again?
I just, all of our city services are wonderful, so I feel bad even, but yes, the library did rank #1, and I had to say that. So,
Must be working then.
you know,
Why are we here?
great segue. So as we've shared with you in our goal progress updates related to your council goal, the strategy that staff and the Library Advisory Board have been working toward is a robust public engagement process to help us connect with the diversity of the community and to really understand what the needs are of everyone in our community and to shape a shared vision for the future. And again, this facilities will be an area of focus, but we're really looking at at library services on a wider view. We really want to learn all of the needs and create a strategic plan that will address those. And staff and the Library Advisory, the Library Advisory Board recommended that we bring in our consultant group, and so we have retained Barry Dunn again. They're here with us today. And we're really pleased that Barry Dunn brings both national and local expertise. Barry Dunn is a large firm that has done a lot of work in libraries, parks and recreation, and public service projects, and brings a lot of support to the group. And then we're also really pleased to have local folks on the team, such as Ruth, and also Dr. Christine Moses and David Work, who's a local architect. So a really well-rounded team to be able to support our needs and work with our community. So from January to May of this next year, staff and Barry Dunn will engage with the Lake Oswego community to help shape that vision for the future. And again, our engagement plan really emphasizes gathering input from the diversity of residents with special attention to include hard-to-reach populations. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And the engagement plan will include informing the community of current library services, informing the community of future library trends, and of course, gathering information about perceived challenges in the community, the library's role in potentially addressing those challenges, barriers that may exist to accessing the library currently, and of course, the future vision for the library. And Barry Dunn will work with the project team to develop a message and brand that's recognizable for community members and resonates with different groups and demographics within the city. So we'll be preparing materials such as information handouts, flyers, poster boards, and comment cards. And you can see some examples from a previous Barry Dunn project here on the slide. And that will be used to advertise the engagement efforts as well as collect feedback. And the tone for materials will be inviting, uplifting, and aspirational for the future, and may be translated as needed to reach the community. And so we're starting that work as soon as we have your blessing on this project. We'll also be having an online presence in addition to in-person opportunities for engagement. Social Pinpoint is a web platform that Barry Dunn uses, and it will allow us to share all kinds of information with the community about the engagement opportunities, as well as give opportunities for surveys, community forums, and various methods online. We will have council and board interviews, so interviews with you all, with the Library Advisory Board members and other boards and commissions, the DEI Advisory Board, youth leadership counselors, who of the additional boards and commissions that I think we will definitely want to talk to. We'll also have the Friends of the Library Board as another important group to speak with. And we'll also have staff interviews as well. In addition to those internal stakeholder groups, we'll have external stakeholder interviews. So we'll be able to talk with community members, community partner agencies, faith-based groups, schools, and other civic institutions. And as we're having these conversations with you, our boards and commissions, and our external stakeholders, we'll also be asking you to identify potential participants for focus groups. We'll talk a little bit more about the focus groups in just a moment. Again, we'll have an online survey option through Social Pinpoint so that folks who may not be able to come and interact with us in person can give feedback there, as well as an online community forum, which is like a bulletin board where people can post their thoughts related to the project. And we'll also be working with two different groups that will help guide this process. One, it will be a staff working group, and the other will be a community visioning task force. And both of these groups will be providing input, but also they will be reviewing and synthesizing the findings from the other engagements and helping to collaboratively collate that into recommendations for us. So we'll be working with that group through the February to May timeframe. The Community Visioning Task Force is a broad-based group of community members that bring different perspectives to the process. And again, they will help us synthesize those findings into recommendations, ultimately, that will be tested through some of the other engagement opportunities that will come later in the process, including the in-person forums and the focus groups. And we anticipate that there will be about 5 community drop-in events conducted in various locations at different times of day, including weekend options, to maximize connection with the community. And when possible, we'll also have a presence at local community events to maximize exposure to the community. And our focus groups will be made of invited community members, including members from BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, people who experience poverty, and people who experience differing abilities communities. And the focus group attendees will be invited to participate in facilitated, in-depth discussions, identifying barriers to access and visions for the library. And some of the potential focus groups that we have been thinking about for our project are listed here on the screen. Also, youth and teens are another often hard to reach group that we're going to be sure to connect with and prioritize. And one thing I wanted to mention that we'd been talking about is that inclusion is not just about inviting people, it's about creating the conditions that make it really feasible for folks to participate. So we're definitely thinking about that, thinking about offering childcare and other ways to make it more feasible for folks to be able to participate and interact with us, in addition to also offering the online ways to engage. And last but not least, there's a lot of neat ways to get feedback through passive information gathering points, and Barry Dunn has been very successful in the past. You can see here, this was actually from one of the projects that they did related to a parks project, but could certainly be utilized in our community as well, having areas around town where people might be able to interact with a passive something like this chalkboard here, where they might be able to give input to us through different places that they might travel in the city, if not the library. And then May will be the point in time when the final meetings of the Community Visioning Task Force and Staff Working Group take place to kind of do the final review of those findings and process those before they are finalized and reported to you all in June of next year. So we have worked hard to design an engagement plan that will address council and community goals. Again, we really want to understand the community's needs and vision for the library as a whole. Facilities, we know will be a focus, but it's not the only reason that we are wanting to have this conversation with the community. In order to have a strategic plan that really addresses the community's needs in the 21st century, it's important to have this conversation, and so that we know how the library can fulfill the future needs and set that strategic plan to achieve them for the community. So again, we're very excited to be before you today to share the plan that we have come up with to get that feedback from the community. We welcome your feedback on the elements of the plan, and specifically, we know you will have insights on which populations and groups to make sure that we talk to and engage with, and suggestions perhaps on how best to reach them in this process. So we would love to hear any comments or questions that you have before we move forward.
Okay. Colleagues? Comments? Councilor? No, please go.
Well, I'm very excited. I think this community, for those of you who have been here for a long time, has gone through the library question once, and it was a long, long time ago, in between the time that we didn't pass the bond. But when we finally made a decision to build a library, it took us 10 years to figure out how to build it, and we put it in the same footprint. And so I'm hoping that this process will be more condensed and a better outcome. So I liked all your engagement process a lot. I went through a similar process when we went through the bonds with the school district. And the one thing that I see that's maybe missing is I hope there's part of this process that we're sort of feeding people a little bit about possibilities, because for many people that are in this room, I mean, we have to break the stigma of what a library is. We think of it as books, you know, if you ask a college person what the stacks are, they will have no idea what you're talking about. Because if you go into a modern college library now, you don't see any books. You see meeting rooms, you see all kinds of resources that they have, and it's the library and it's the gathering area. And I think part of this, I'm hoping you will be casting some, I don't know, some teasers of what some libraries are, what other communities have done, what are the successful processes that other communities have come out with a great product that everybody loves. And then, frankly, I don't know what the modeling of a library system is anymore, where there's been talk of having a branch system in Lake Oswego for years, decades, and we don't have we have one branch. It's located in First Edition, and it's, you know, and I think there's some visioning that needs to happen, and I don't know if it's better to have a bunch of branches or not, but I think it's that type of thinking that we need to get people to maybe get out of, again, that stigma of the library is in First Edition and it takes up this amount of space and that's kind of it, to what it can be for this community, because it certainly is an opportunity, and I think we probably have one chance at bat to make this really work well. And so, you know, and you don't have to have the answers tonight, but I do think we need to have some sort of the sizzle to sell the steak, to get people super excited. When we went through to build a new elementary school or the middle schools, we showed them examples of what, and then everyone's going, oh my gosh, we've been missing that for decades. Maybe not decades, but for a long time. And so, anyway, that would be part of it. And then the other, I don't know how to put this delicately, but the future of Lake Oswego is the kids and the younger generation. And I don't want to have us old people be making some of the decisions, because by the time we get it built, we may not be able to read anymore. I'm just kidding, no, but I mean, but my point is how do we get that new generation that may not be living here, but needs to have input, because they're kind of the ones that are going to be benefiting, just like, I mean, I grew up here, and I remember the Lake Oswego Library was one story, and then when they rebuilt it, it had a basement and an upstairs, and we thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, and then we were told 2 years later that it was not big enough and it didn't even meet the demands of the community already. And so I don't want that to happen again. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Councilor.
Thank you.
Councilor Raff.
Great presentation, great thought put into the plan and what this can be for the community. You know, I'm a big fan of the library. I was on the board. My kids learn to read in the basement. Like, I love it. I just, more of a comment, I just don't see how this will be possible in the next several years with all the other things we have to spend money on as a council. I want this to happen immediately, but we have so many things that we don't have money for. And so my recommendation would be, and I also don't believe in passing a bond to pay for it either. So I know, we differ there, but we'll figure it out. I'm not saying it's a no-go, but I just think that when you come back and when we keep going down the road, for myself, I don't really think that we should be spending any money on this right now. But I just encourage you, as we go down the process, to be really creative on how we think about paying for this, knowing the environment the city is in right now. So I think it's just an uphill battle. There's a lot more speed bumps ahead of you than there were when this project kind of got started. So just be mindful of that. And but yeah, I think we definitely want and need a new library. I think the finances of it are going to be really tricky for all of us. So. But thank you. I mean, I look forward to it. We're going to have it at some point, so it's going to be great.
Thank you.
It's great because we're putting you on the task force.
Yeah. I advocated on that.
Very good. Very good. Councilor Webb.
Oh, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I think that's something that is much needed. I think that as we look forward to this this process, unfortunately, with sadness, I won't be able to be part of it on an official process, but maybe there's a way for me to engage in other ways.
And we're going to pay for it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for volunteering.
We're asking for state funding, so deliver for your district.
Well, no, to Councilor Wendland's point, I think it's important that we also be thinking about too what our needs are. I think that we've gone through this process, and traditionally a library has always been its own building, and it's been sitting by itself, and it's a single purpose, right? But I think as we look forward to the future, I think that we should be kind of be thinking about what are other models we could use, right? And I think a lot about, for example, the North Anchor project. Maybe that, we've got a ground floor space. Maybe it doesn't need. Maybe we figure out how to maybe have a satellite there or something, or maybe we talk about some of these office buildings that are having some vacancy rates and things like that. So instead of building new, maybe we can repurpose. We can jointly co-locate. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, co-locate. Maybe there's office space up above, and maybe the ground floor space of some building that might be underutilized. It could be used for a broadband purpose. So I'd encourage us to look at all avenues. I think that to move away from just looking at only a standalone building on a city block that is used specifically only for that purpose. And so as we've said before, the purpose of the library and the uses of the library continues to evolve. And I think that if we're able to incorporate that into a multi-use building, who knows, maybe have people live on top of the library. In case, just something to think about.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilor Mbu.
Yeah, I thank you for your presentation, and I'm a big supporter of library. I think these are learning places that have to be developed in any modern city, and especially now, we need a library. We need a space where library is no longer a place where you go borrow books and go, but it can be a big center. It's in French, like you have the ABC there, like they are centers, we call them centers, not just library. And honestly, if you go around, you go to West Lynn, or like you go to Tualatin, you go to Beaverton, you look at our library, you say, come on, Lake Oswego, what are we doing? No, and I have to, we are Lake Oswego, but we go to other places, they have better. If you go to Beaverton, it's impressive what they have there. So why we can't have that? And that's my being, okay, I am in Lake Oswego, I need to have something. So a general obligation bond is a way to go, and have the money and build a library that's, where we get the money is always the question, but sometimes we don't ask them when we do some other projects that are for me, what is important is not the immediacy, because administration is the future. You think of the kids who will learn to read, the aging folks who can have a center where they can go and have enhancement in their life, or a library can be used also to even generate funds. People can use it, paid for concert, for some other things. So I really support this project, and what you're doing, like your presentation now is with the deadline, we should go everywhere in the city before we put it for a vote. Like everywhere, you check all the segment of the city, the schools, the people in the neighborhood associations, and you explain when all that is done. If we put a bond, people will vote 58%. I guarantee that it will pass.
Maybe more.
Yeah, 58 is good. That's all we need, and have the money and build a library.
58%, that ain't the record.
Thank you, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Brew.
Thank you.
We just need 51% or 50.1.
Good in mind. We don't want to recount.
Yeah.
Well, we don't often, Director Kelly, we don't get to see you here too often, so I want to take the opportunity just to express gratitude to you and your team for all the hard work you do on a day-to-day basis, especially through the pandemic. So many libraries were shut down, unable to serve the community. You and your team really made a concerted effort to continue to find ways to serve all the many different customers you have, and you deserve lots of recognition for your work in that regard. And a lot of times we talk about like parks, being the heart of the community. I think the library really is the soul, and it serves such an important place here, and it's become exemplary of community values, of an inclusive community and a general resource that it touches so many different members. I'm glad that we're here today, having what it seems like when you give that timeline. We've been talking about libraries in this community in one way or another, ever since the beginning. So a continuation of I think this community's interest in always looking to improve and serve more people in an even better way. And so from my colleagues here tonight, I'm seeing unanimous support. I'm hearing unanimous support for moving ahead with this process, and we look forward, I think, all of us to being a part of that process as well, and engaging with so many different folks from all segments of the community, all the many different people we interact with here in LO. So.
Thank you.
Thank
well,
you.
we thank you so much for your support. I'm happy to pass along to the library staff the news, and just reassuring anyone out there, we'll still have books, absolutely, at the library, but it's wonderful that we'll be able to engage with the community to understand what other needs, and their wider vision for the future to be able to meet those as well. So thank you again. Appreciate your time very much.
And Ruth, thank you for being here. Yeah. We didn't get to hear anything from you, but we know you're playing a big role.
I would like to just say a word or two, if I might, just in response to the things that you have said about what you hope we are thinking about and keeping in mind. Everything from, looking at other models of library service delivery, being sure that we're throwing, we're including in our engagement process ideas about what's possible. And also about funding, the issues about funding. And I've been involved in libraries for decades, and many building projects and generations of thinking about what are the service models of today. I've never seen it be easy to find the money, but I've seen many libraries come to reality. And I think in this case, it's because, you start at the right place. You start where Melissa is starting, which is to ask the community about what they think, about their needs, and have a conversation, have a dialogue with the community in a broad-based way. People who use the library, people who don't use the library, have a conversation with everybody about, including youth, about the needs of the community and where they think the library fits in. And I have every confidence that this process is going to be fun and exciting and knowledge building for everybody here, myself included. And so I'll just conclude by saying, we hear you. We will take all of these things into account. And we thank you for the opportunity to do this work. Thank you for inviting us into your community. We're excited to be there to help you have this very delightful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Ruth. We're glad to have you on the team here as a part of this. It sounds like the team we have engaged on this project is exceptional.
Absolutely.
It's great to hear.
Huge thanks to Barry Dunn for all of their help designing this engagement plan. And we're really excited to just get talking to the community and hear what they have to tell us.
Well, congratulations, and let's consider this kicked off.
Melissa, you forgot, I mean, not only that you were #1 rated, but that you have one of the highest circulations in the whole country. You need to kind of drop that in the presentation too, so.
Yes, we do have one of the highest circulation rates per capita in the nation.
Right.
It's true. And we're an award-winning library.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, it is incredible. I will say every time having grown up here and going to the library, time now I went when I was younger, and I don't go as much anymore. But we go with the youth council, and the last time we were there, Councilor Boop and I were there with the youth council. It's incredible what you've done with the space and the way you've taken that same the physical space and transformed it to meet the modern day needs, of library users. And you make really good use of the resources you have, and the team is phenomenal. So
thank you. Well, thanks again to the library staff for all that they do. I'll be happy to pass that along to them. Thanks again.
Thank you, Director.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next study session is item 10.2. It's the draft development solicitation for the Boones Ferry Road property. Joining us both via Zoom. Is our Community Development Director, Scott Siegel, and Jonathan Williams of Metro.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Buck. And
hold 1 second, Director. We're going to get your volume. Okay, try it again.
Okay, I hope that wasn't too loud. Good evening.
No, it wasn't loud enough.
Oh, okay. Good evening, Mayor Buck, members of the City Council, Scott Siegel, Community Development Director. And joining me this evening is Jonathan Williams, and John is a Principal Project Manager for Affordable Housing and Transit-Oriented Development at Metro, and one of our partners on the Boones Ferry Road Affordable Housing Project. I also want to acknowledge Devin Ellen, who is a development manager with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, and their staff have also been working with us on this. And this evening, Mr. Williams and I are here to, one, give you an update on the process that we're engaged in for preparing to issue a development solicitation for the project, and also to ask for your feedback and hopefully answer any questions that you might have ahead of your December 20th meeting, which is scheduled for your formal action on approving the development solicitation, which is an integral part of the sales agreement, the purchase sales agreement for the property and the contract that we have with Metro. So this was, as you may recall, this was one of the contingencies that we had on the property sale, that the city would have an opportunity to participate in drafting the development solicitation, and that the council, in fact, would be able to review that before it's approved and issued in January. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. I only have 9 slides, so not quite as lean as Mr. Cross, Director Cross, but we'll do our best here. Is that large enough?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So this work is pursuant to the City Council goal that is on your screen there. The initiative is to complete work on key housing initiatives, including this one, making a decision on the Boones Ferry Road staging area property for affordable housing, and supporting other nonprofit-led housing projects in the community. And as you may recall, most recently, Mercy Housing Northwest broke ground on their development of 100 affordable rental units on the Merrillhurst Commons campus, and which is a huge milestone for the community. And this project is somewhat unique in that the city actually owns and controls the property, and so we've been a partner in developing this RFP or RFQ. The presentation this evening, I'll go over the project requirements, including the threshold or threshold criteria for developing affordable housing under the Metro Regional Housing Bond. And Mr. Williams will, I'm sure, be able to fill in any gaps that I create or answer any questions that you might have on what those requirements are. We'll give you an overview of the developer solicitation process or selection process, including the city's role in that decision, the scoring criteria, the funding or capital funding that will likely go into a project on this property, and then the schedule for ultimately breaking ground and seeing the project develop. So as you may recall, and is reflected in the intergovernmental agreement that we entered into with Metro and the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, there are certain expectations here through the Metro Regional Housing Bond. We're both addressing those, as well as Clackamas County, the Housing Authority of Clackamas County's local implementation strategy, where they've identified a number of units and unit types and income requirements that we're trying to meet as we're trying to meet the housing needs of the community. And at least 20% of the 50 units that we're attempting to target here would be affordable to those families or households earning 30% or less of area median income. And just for reference, the Clackamas County income requirements for their housing voucher program, 30% of area median income for an individual household is $22,400 a year. So it's, in the range of $10 to $11 an hour for someone who's working in a service job or working full-time somewhere. For a family of two, it's $25,600. For a family of four, it's up to approximately $32,000. So these are the very lowest income households or families, and this housing that we're attempting to develop would also meet the needs of those who have been houseless, or they're moving out of houselessness into a more stable and secure position with housing. So at least 20% of the units pursuant to the regional housing bond and the local implementation strategy would be targeted to those individuals or families. 25 units would be family size, and this, I think, comes primarily through the Clackamas County program or local implementation strategy, and there's really an intentional effort there to try to meet the needs of families, whether it's a single individual with a child or children, or a couples or a larger family. And so at least half of those units that we're developing would be, or 25 units would be targeted at families, meaning 2 bedrooms or larger units. And then all of the housing that's developed would be meeting those earning at or below 80% of area median income. And we've, I think, provided examples of what this represents in the past. 80% or actually 80% of AMI for a family of 4 today would be approximately $85,000. And when we've looked at comparable sort of vocations or jobs, I think we were considering that a entry-level teacher or firefighter, I think, was somewhere in that range, with a family of 4. And so just to give you some idea of, who this housing would serve. The project requirements also include direct community engagement by the developer. And this is in addition to the engagement that the project team has already undertaken. And I should mention that as part of the due diligence and the work that Metro and the Housing Authority did and that we participated in, there was a 23-member community stakeholder group that convened, that Metro convened, that was really intended to get input from those who would, or representing those who would benefit or be able to use this housing. So, but in addition to people who are representing, those communities, whether they're from traditionally disadvantaged populations or people who have been houseless previously, we also had members of this group who were from social service providers, including the local ministry that provides transitional shelter for people in Lake Oswego, and representatives of the neighborhood, including those who live in the immediate vicinity on West Sunset Drive, and the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association all participated in this process, which resulted in the community values statement, which is part of the document that you have before you. The developer then would be expected, the successful proposer would be expected to carry on that engagement as they're doing their design development and getting input from the community. The requirements also include, this would be part of the development proposal, resident services plan. So having a strategy really so that it's targeted to those who would be living in this community, living in the community or the housing, to help them ensure that they're successful. So education and support around eviction, utilities, all of the sort of responsibilities that go with being in rental housing, so that they can be successful in that position, as well as support services. For example, I don't know what the support services would be necessarily for this project, but I know that from the work that Mercy Housing did in developing their concept, they worked closely with the school district and have formed some relationship there to provide support. Other project requirements, both the design and the construction process for this development will be required to utilize co-bid or disadvantaged business enterprises for design and construction. That's somewhat similar to the program that the city has for co-bid. So it's consistent in that way. As I've discussed, the requirements also include consistency with the local implementation strategy. Those are the affordability metrics that I was summarizing, as well as looking to leverage other sources of funding that are available for this type of project, including low-income housing tax credits, which are a federal subsidy. There's a requirement that the proposer sort of describe how they would address the screening and leasing of the apartments, so that it's the process is open, transparent, accessible, and administratively as easy and simple as possible. And there are state housing community development or community service department requirements for affordable housing that the proposer will be required to address, that relate to livability and sustainability. So, for example, the units they'll be required to provide air conditioning, just as an example, in those units, as well as meeting accessibility guidelines. And I'll just pause there. I don't know if the council members have any questions, or if Mr. Williams has anything that you would add, or that perhaps I missed.
Councilor Windland has a question.
Director Siegel, I remember all the units had to be 80% of the AMI. I remember that, or below. Is the 30% AMI new to this formula, or was that always part of the?
Yeah, it was always part of the concept, and now we just have clarity around what that percentage is.
Okay, and then can seniors live in this, or is it restricted to just working families, or is it?
It's people of all ages and abilities.
Oh, okay, so they don't have to necessarily have the AMI from that could be from Social Security or pensions or things like that. It doesn't have to be earned income.
That's correct, Counselor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Director.
So I'll continue. Yeah, I'll continue, and just please interrupt me if you have questions.
Okay.
All right, so the developer selection process is actually led by Metro, and Metro, as the owner of the property, utilizing the site acquisition funds that we have from the regional housing bond, will lead the developer selection process. It will consist of a panel. The panel will have representatives from the city, from the Housing Authority, of course, and Metro, as well as local stakeholders. So the stakeholder group that provided such valuable input during the development of this RFP will be asked to, members of that committee will have an opportunity to serve on the selection panel. And the team felt that that was important. The stakeholders group themselves felt that that would be valuable in order to transfer that experience and make sure that there's some continuity and kind of what we've heard from the community and how developers are responding to this and how their proposals are evaluated. Then the next step in the process, so there'll be a selection panel. The council will have an opportunity to appoint a representative if you wanted to appoint a representative from amongst yourselves, discussing the process with City Manager Bennett. We felt that having a staff representative at the table too would be helpful just for technical expertise and support. So that's kind of the panel. The review and approval process ultimately is conducted jointly by Metro and the Housing Authority, and the development team, once they're approved, they're tasked with preparing a concept, sort of similar to our redevelopment process where there's a concept approval. In this case, the concept would be endorsed or approved by Metro and the Housing Authority, and then that would become part of the development agreement with Metro that would then allow for the land transfer to the developer. The funding for the project would be established, or it would be, I guess, documented and agreed upon between the Housing Authority and the developer. And as I said earlier, in the proposal, the developer would be expected to provide, their proposal or their strategy for how they're going to put together the capital for this project. The housing bond would provide, I believe, up to $10 million in capital for the project itself, and then there's other finances that would be required. The scoring of the proposals, as you can see here, this is the kind of the concept that is fairly conventional approach, where we're looking for a team that has the experience. They can demonstrate that they've done this sort of thing before. The concept is sound. It includes both the narrative description of what they're proposing to do and the development program, as well as a pro forma, so the reviewers can see the numbers and be confident that what they're proposing is actually constructible and the market that we have in the future when this is proposed. The concept would also include essentially some schematics and a massing study, basically, so we can see what it is that they're proposing to build. Very early on in our process, when we went through the rezoning, the city commissioned a site feasibility study with Turan Architecture, and we did that in order to make sure we were confident that the site could accommodate the number of units that we were being asked to consider. We also used that study for the traffic evaluation that was part of the rezoning process, and what we found was that it was capable of accommodating potentially approximately 50 units of housing. So the developer will they'll prepare their own concept and development plan. They have our study as well as Metro's feasibility study, which is an attachment to the RFP that they can look to as a resource, but those designs or those concepts that were prepared earlier are not binding. In fact, they're not even really direction to the developer. They're a resource and a reference. So Ultimately, the developer that's selected will need to put forward a concept that meets the city's development code and also meets the project requirements that are outlined here. The other scoring criteria here, diversity, equity, inclusion, is both met through the design and construction process and approach, as well as the operation and maintenance of the housing. And there's a requirement in the RFP that asks for them to demonstrate that. And then finally, responsiveness to the statement of values. And so this is the document, or these are the values the stakeholders group prepared and approved, and that provides some general guidance around elements like the outdoor environment, outdoor space, if there are families who will be living there, making sure that the site plan has adequate outdoor space for children and for just enjoyment, and for people who are living there to have a quality living environment, as well as the building design, management of the community, and services. The stakeholders group also felt that it was important to express the qualities that are important for a successful developer to have, and they wanted to make sure that, or at least they wanted to encourage through the criteria, developers that have an approach that's collaborative. So as they're developing their concept and their design, they're reaching out to the community, they're consulting the neighborhood association, for example. They're designing their project with people, and not just waiting until the permitting process to do the sort of mandatory or the compulsory neighborhood meetings. They also wanted a developer who would be taking a long-term approach and ensuring that this project will stand the test of time, and it will also be programmed that it can be viable over the long term. So these are just some examples of the different types of funding that would be probably necessary to put together a project like this and are part of the development solicitation. So the council in previous study sessions and policy decisions has created incentives for affordable housing. We do offer a system development charge fee waiver, as well as a development review fee waiver for affordable housing developments that meet the city's affordability criteria. So those incentives would likely be they would be part of the package that's offered here. The other funding sources, as you can see, a large chunk of that is through the regional affordable housing bond funds. And then the county has a certain number of vouchers that would be supported with other subsidies, and then the likelihood that this would have low-income housing tax credits supporting it as well. Are there any questions about the funding? This is not an area that I'm necessarily an expert on, so Mr. Williams is here if you have questions about funding or anything else that we've covered so far.
I had a question.
No, Councilor Nguyen.
So again, I'm sure we talked about it already, but can you remind me again, what's the city's portion of this? Is it just the land portion? Is that what we're?
Waivers.
Oh, yeah, Councilor.
Waivers of the. Have a sense of.
Councilor Nguyen. Yes, the city's contribution would be the system development charge fee waivers and development review fee waivers. The land we have a purchase sale agreement for the land that's based on market value.
You have a sense of what the total cost of the land, the waivers, about how much that costs?
Yeah, the land is, the sales price for the land is $2.5 million. The system development fee charge waivers, we don't know what the exact number is on that yet, because it depends on the number of units and things like water meter sizes and a number of other things. But it'd probably be in the neighborhood of $1 million or close to that.
Director Siegel, when folks submit their proposal, do they have their kind of funding stack worked out at that time?
I'll take that, Dr. Siegel. Thank you, Council. Yeah, so they'll have a preliminary concept of what they think their costs will be. You will have worked with our architect to come up with sort of an estimate, and then and then, yeah, have sort of a preliminary capital stack. And then what will happen is they'll have about a year to actually turn that concept, working with community to refine the design, but then also to refine their financing. So they'll probably have, between a year, 18 months to, once they're selected, to really refine the project and then come back with a finalized design that is with a final capital stack.
And Mr. Williams, what can, in terms of engagement, once the property is sold and a developer is selected, what's Metro's involvement then with the, if any, with the developer and the engagement process?
Yeah, that's something to be. That we will have basically we call an exclusive negotiating agreement, and that will commit the developer to conduct engagement. We will be kind of co-creating, we'll be looking, as part of their solicitation, they'll be proposing an engagement strategy. And so that'll be part of the sort of the scored approach. And so Metro, I'd say, will have a intermediary role, facilitator role to some extent, but it'll really be primarily on the developer and the city to ensure that, developer works through the engagement process,
Yeah, okay. That's great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, please continue.
Thank you. And Mayor Buck, just to add on to what Mr. Williams was saying there, and the development solicitation does, it asks the developer to provide an engagement process and outreach, particularly to those who are, likely to need housing or would benefit from the housing. One thing that we've discussed is that the solicitation could be more explicit about also touching base with the neighborhood association as they're doing that. I think it's implied, but we can include language that's more explicit around that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Just one more slide, and this is the project schedule. It's conceptual, but we're here in December. Reviewing the solicitation terms. The property sale would close in January, provided the council approves the solicitation at your next meeting on the 20th. The solicitation would publish in January. It would be out for, is it 60 days or 90, John?
Most likely 60.
Most likely 60 days. Then the selection process and the agreements would follow. That would take us through the spring. Funding, design, and permitting, because you can tell the timeline becomes more sort of open-ended, or not open-ended, but not as precise as we get into latter part of next year, and then likelihood of having construction begin in late 2024 or early 2025. So, are there any questions or any feedback so far? And this concludes our presentation.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you, Director Siegel. Does anyone have any questions, comments? No, I think I'll say the already, thus far, this project, the outreach that Metro did on the community visioning engaged so many folks in the community. I've heard really good feedback from people that some people who attend a lot of different sessions and NLO, and they attended these visioning sessions. They said, wow, this is so many folks that are a part of our community that we've never seen anything like this before. So kudos to Metro and the team for really engaging a diverse group of people in the visioning around this project. So already we haven't done anything really with the property. It's already bringing people together. So that is fantastic. It's notable that this project is our first city-initiated family affordable housing project, and it's a big deal. Director Siegel, you and your team are doing a really good job leading this forward, working with HAC and Metro. Stress the, you mentioned it, but also stress the importance of good communication with the neighbors during the especially during the construction period. I think we'll definitely want to find a committed operator who will be as good of an operator for the folks who will live in this project, much like Northwest Housing Alternatives has been a tremendous neighbor to Lake Oswego at their 2 projects that are just down the road, of course, in the same neighborhood. And of course, we expect, every person in the town, a multifamily operator, to be a good neighbor, but it's different here because we have a role in this. We don't get to have a say in every every development project that goes up and how it's operated, but we do have a chance here. So finding that good operator is important. I will say I have heard lots of excitement out in the community that develops affordable housing, specifically about this project and being able to work in Lake Oswego. So I think we're going to have a lot of interest when this RFP, RFQ, whatever it is, goes out. And I just want to recognize you too and the team looking at the results of the community visioning and the work that you did with the broader community, with the neighborhood as well. You really incorporated that feedback into the qualities you're looking for in a developer, and I really feel like this proposal reflects what I read in the community engagement and neighborhood meetings. So, good job. Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Excuse me if I may.
Oh,
okay, sorry. If I may make a comment here. Okay, virtually hurting. Just to be clear, when you say we're going to make a good effort to find a developer and that sort of thing, I just want to be technically clear here that this is we are commenting on the evaluation criteria. We have we will be serving on the evaluation committee. But the solicitation is actually by Metro and HACC.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
So when we say we are looking for developer, that is how we're doing it.
In the broadest sense.
Okay, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Boone.
You have to live in Oregon to make the decision. Is that kind of the wide net? Is that
It's a wide net, yeah.
It's a wide net.
No, it is important. Many folks involved in this process. We are not the ultimate decision makers. Okay, anyone else? So. Any other feedback? Okay, well, Director Siegel, Mr. Williams, thank you both. Please move forward with the good work.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Break time? Break? Okay, let's take about a 10-minute recess. Okay, we are back in session. Next on the agenda, item 10.3, it's a study session on a naming policy related to city areas and facilities. And joining us for this discussion are our assistant to the city manager, Madison Thiesing, and Jerry Gabrielos. Good to have you both here.
Today that my name has been pronounced correctly, and it hasn't happened very much since I moved here, so thank you.
This isn't West Lynn.
Mayor and council, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting some of you yet, but just a little bit of background. I joined the team in Lake Oswego maybe a few weeks ago. My background, just so you know, I worked for 3 members of the Chicago City Council. We had an artist in residence on staff. It was a lot of fun. While in Chicago too, worked with a lot of muralists. After that, worked in a town in Minnesota that was oddly named after a Confederate colonel. And finally, and most recently, was the city manager in West Lynn. And here I am today. So we're going to just jump right into it. This is a bit of an agenda for our presentation. There won't be, I think there's 17 slides. So I'm just going to jump to the next one. The fundamental question that I think we trying to answer is how should the city honor individuals in public spaces? And over the past few weeks, that's been something that I looked to other cities to research. I did some backtracking in Chicago and had a lot of interactions with the staff here, phoned the staff in Alameda, which just recently updated its naming policy, had exchanged emails with some staff in Hillsborough, and frankly did a fair amount of research to answer the question that we're up debating tonight. So cities nationwide are reconsidering or developing naming policies. If you've paid attention to the news for the last 10 years, you'll notice that that's been something that cities are doing with everything from the removal of statues to renaming facilities. We also want to develop, the mic is just in and out, anyhow.
It sounds good.
Okay, good. Developed some consistency for naming and honoring people. In some of the research that we did for this, I found that the policy wasn't necessarily consistent. There is a set of guidelines or a policy for how parks are to be named, but not really guidelines for how other things, other city assets, if you will, are named. Then there's just been some things that have come up in Lake Oswego recently that sort of feed into this discussion. We received an email from a family member who was concerned about a garden that was named after their parents. There was a discussion about naming the tennis center and a mural that was been proposed for City Hall. So the questions for council, and I am going to read these because it's a fairly long presentation, and these are questions that I think you as councilors will enjoy discussing. Should the practice of naming areas or facilities of people continue? If so, should the naming of areas and facilities include city staff members? As we'll go on a little bit later tonight, you'll see that there's a fair amount of items in Lake Oswego that have been named for former staff or former councilors, former mayors. And then how should the city manage the sale of naming rights for an area or facility, either by direct sale of naming rights or when approached by a donor about naming or renaming a facility? And then there's some questions about art. Should the public art guidelines be modified to add a procedural step to have council approve the criteria that would be used for to commission a piece of art? Should the naming policy concepts related to honoring identifiable people be applied to depiction of individuals in the city-owned public art? And should the City Hall mural selected as a part of the current public art guidelines be completed? These were in the packet, but I just want to bring these to your attention at the start of the presentation so they're top of mind as we go through the rest. So why do we name things? We name it to provide it with an identity. I mean, that was sort of the background for this. And there's some criteria that cities use in naming facilities nationwide: neighborhood, the purpose of the building, natural or geological features, historical places, events, and we name buildings after people who are living or deceased. Some common criteria. Typically, cities with naming policies have a policy that a person be deceased for a minimum number of years. In Alameda, there was a historian that was on the staff, or I shouldn't say on the staff, on the task force that did some of this work. The historian recommended 3 years, just enough time for things to cool, if you will, and then enough time for research to be done about a person.
Things to cool.
Well, to use an example from Lake Oswego, this is anecdotal, but a fair amount of things were named right after someone had passed away or retired. So there's sometimes an impetus to do something immediately to honor somebody's memory or their career. And then some distributed, combined discouraged and prohibited. Some discouraged practices, names that are overrepresented. You don't want to have names, too many names of the same building or place or whatever it might be. And then names that are derogatory or discriminatory. There are some exceptions to these conventions in cities. If an item is sponsored or if there's naming rights involved, and then items beneath a certain value. I believe there's benches in Lake Oswego that have been donated. It's a common practice in a lot of cities. So here's a sample of some city-owned named assets. Some of the places you probably go frequently or walk through or have been to on some occasions. You can see historic reference, items named after council and staff, and some named after community members. And some items that came with purchase agreements, that they were kept that way through the names. The current procedure, so there's a couple part of this. There's the policy question about naming, and then there's also the procedure question. So right now, what exists is a policy that really just is, I shouldn't say exclusive, but the only city policy on this is related to Park and Rec. The request is received by the Park and Rec Commission and then forwarded to council. One of the recommendations that we're putting forward, and this is pretty straightforward, is really just if anybody wants to name or rename a facility or city-owned asset, it would be submitted to council. The council would direct it to the appropriate board or staff. Staff would do the work. A recommendation would be provided to council, and council would make a decision. This would be in cases if somebody wants to name a room at the library or a room at City Hall. It happens that you will get these proposals if you haven't already. So some naming policy questions. Do you want to make a remark here? I can't remember. Oh, okay, very good. Here's the questions, and maybe, Mayor, I'll throw this to you. But should the practice of naming areas or facilities in honor of people continue? If so, should the naming of areas and facilities include city staff members? I know these are questions that I've spoken with the city manager about that I know the council would like to discuss. And then how should the city manage the sale of naming rights or a facility? So I'll throw that up to council, or Mayor, if you want to go in a certain direction, I'm happy to follow your lead.
Yes, okay, so folks, we're gonna, let's have discussion, give feedback on these three questions. Who wants to go first? Councilor Moop.
Yeah, about
3 questions.
the question is, yeah, I think, there's the historicity of things, and we leave legacies for people, and the naming of areas, facilities, and it should continue. It has always been in every part of the world. In all civilizations, things have been named from ancient Greece to up to now. You go to the Colosseum or you go to everywhere in Europe, in Asia, the naming of things. And, we just have to be careful, But yes, I think city staff should be included in what we're doing because they represent, when city council is not in function, the city staff represent the city. So it's very dangerous to just have things, give it to some people. I know that for the Art Council, the city is member of the at council. We have 2 members over there, so it's not a problem. But yeah, I think city staff should be involved in what we are doing so that we know they can come here. People who are not working for the city, if they're doing things, they're not respond like.
I think they mean should city staff be included in the process or as named?
Yeah, I think the question is, should we name things after city staff? And I guess, my recommendation to you would be no, unless something extraordinary, unless there was an act of something extraordinary, or unless they died in the line of duty. It seems like that might be an appropriate time to name city staff. But if you name things after city staff, you tend to name things after only folks in high position in the city, like, the city manager, or folks who had a lot of community profile. And I think you often end up in a situation where it's sort of inequitable in terms of considering the contribution of city staff. So I would say, as you talk about it, for me, the question is, how could you identify an extraordinary contribution or a policy that said we'd recognize someone who died in the line of duty? Okay. I don't mean in terms of the process, because the staff will continue to do all the research for you as you consider a name.
Yeah, and also naming them, of course, we should name city staff. I mean, if we say no, it means we will never name a city staff.
Do you agree with what?
I agree with what, no, I agree, but it doesn't, yes, like a police officer can be,
Well, but
a hero.
I mean, but there again, I mean, you're kind of now picking who's your favorites and who are not.
No,
I mean,
I'm not saying.
You mean in the line of duty of death?
No, or anyone, even someone going outside in the snow, or, the guy who was cutting with the saw, something happened. No, I'm just saying that we cannot say, why are we even focusing on city staff?
I think because that's kind of the controversy that came about related to the tennis center, is the two folks being at the tennis center were both city staff. And I think the debate is, and this is something you all ought to think about, is we are compensated for the work that we do.
Yeah.
And that's why I suggest to you that for city staff would only be really if we did something that was above and beyond the compensation that we earned. I also would suggest that I like what other cities do in terms of requiring someone to be deceased for at least 3 years, because that allows us not to make a decision in the emotional moment, but rather after we've been able to make sure there's nothing that makes us nervous. So that's where I would go with both of these, is yes, we should do it, but we should wait until someone's been gone for a while. And city staff should be very limited to special circumstances. Because it's because we're compensated to do this work financially.
I mean, you look at organizations all across the country that are having to rename buildings. I mean, we have Nike headquarters that has had to rename several buildings because oh, sorry. But, or other places within different jurisdictions and whatever. I think there's, not that you can't honor somebody while they're alive, but it helps after they can stop doing things that sometimes they may do or something. It just prevents, I think, future issues that you might have going down the line. And so, I mean, and then when they're aptly named, when somebody who's molesting children has the child care center at Nike named after them, that's just like that was just a really bad situation. And my concern is not that I don't want to recognize staff, but I think one of the issues that I had with the tennis center is that it originated by staff on the whole process, and they were the ones who the advocates and whatever. And I don't mind advocating, but I think it really has to come from a level that's maybe not just staff-driven, but certainly council should have been part of that process.
Do you like the procedure that they've outlined?
Yeah, I think, hey, we're at the last straw for things, and we should at least be in the initial conversation of anything that's happening. I think that's my kind of feeling. And 99%, we probably say yes. I mean, I don't know, there's not a, but I think we just need that check and balance. And so people just have that, if they have something that they want to name. And then I do like your point about the money part. I mean, if somebody wants to come in and that's a whole criteria that a lot of organizations go through, is if somebody comes up and says, can I name it after my grandfather and here's a $500 check or a $5 million check, I mean, what are the criteria and how do you deal with that? And I would say that it doesn't happen very often, and so have it start with council. They can have a discussion with the city manager, and then, you know, we can deal with it as we go. And if it's an organization that is not pure, you might say, then we just say, well, no, we're not going to take your donation. Right. You know, I mean, because I think there has to be a check and balance from that standpoint. We're just not going to take money from anyone.
No, we should not.
And so do we currently have a kind of a, I mean, again, this doesn't happen too often, but if someone comes.
We don't really have a policy. You do have some of these properties, I think, that Jerry went over are places where the family donated either the land or a substantial amount of cash in exchange for the naming rights. I do think that when you start talking about some of your athletic facilities, I think that's a separate question about whether you're going to allow the sale of sponsorships or naming rights. But what I like about this recommendation is that you're going to handle that on a case-by-case basis as opposed to having a single policy, because it might be appropriate in some circumstances and not appropriate in others.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
Mayor, just to add, I'm going to go to the next slide and we can come back to those questions. But as we're talking about the approach to donations and sponsorships, Hillsborough, when they redid their policy last year, did something that we think is a smart move to do these on a per project basis. I will say that in another city I worked for, I did get a call from somebody who said, I would like to rename this specific building, and there's some funds involved, and handing those things on a per project basis gives the city some leeway or wiggle room on policies as you move forward. You don't want to create structures for every single scenario, frankly, because they're too hard to anticipate. So.
The other component I would add is with this process, it starts with city council. And as Jerry had pointed out, all we had was the rules for Parks and Recreation. So this opens the door that we are at least able to point to a policy and a process that we can follow systematically and consistently throughout the city as these opportunities arise. But right now, we have nothing to point to unless it's a Parks and Recreation asset. So this is broadening our approach, but also creating it so we have a consistent process that starts with city council.
Yeah, I would, no, but something very important, we should not accept, even if it's per project, like I have 500 million and I have my grandfather who was a fascist and I want to have him named. We cannot accept that, like money should not buy. Not
I think they're saying that, yeah.
Right,
yeah. It goes through a process.
It can't eliminate the guilt or the what's happened, right, exactly.
Yeah, okay. I mean.
Okay.
And I think the other part that when we did the presentation on Monday as the listening session, this also creates a lot more transparency of how we name projects, how do we accept money. It would be done in a public meeting versus as a department. It's creating, again, legitimacy, a process, systematic, so that we can do it thoughtfully and with transparency as well.
And just one more plug. I do think that the 3 years after you've died part does help you manage the, unlike the situation where someone might want to donate for somebody you really don't want to honor. It gives us time to say, is this a person whose behavior is consistent with our community's values or not?
Right, okay. Okay, Councilor Rath.
You can do an Adidas story if you want.
Right. So, Councilor Wendland brought it up. I actually lived through it in my 18 years at Nike, where we had a saying, and so I was in sports marketing, where we dealt with athletes, pro athletes, naming buildings, having banners all around campus, having our daycare center named the Joe Paterno Daycare Center. I lived through it. I was the one that had to deal with it. And we had a saying after Joe Paterno wasn't the first one that we had to deal with. There's a long line of athletes in our history, or in the history of any sports company, that when they become part of the company, everyone thinks they're great. And then,
skeletons come out of the closet. So we had a saying later on that was, we don't get in the real estate business. And so it's a very careful thing to do. If you choose to do it, I couldn't agree more with Martha's recommendation and your recommendation here on the process. My stipulation would be, you don't name anything after anybody who's alive. I think and you got to do a lot of due diligence, because you never want to be on the other end of that. So I couldn't agree more with this recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor F. Councilor Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Cabreratos, is that how you say it?
Jerry is fine.
Jerry. I tried. I missed these. So I want to know is, in your research and looking at some of the other cities and other organizations with their naming policies, did you ever come across any sort of policy that might stipulate maybe there may be an actual permanent name for a facility, and then have like honorary naming that is finite in period, maybe like a 5-year period or 10-year period, and then after that it just comes off? Or has it always just been, you named a building in perpetuity until you find out something bad happened and then you change it?
I'm going to pass this to Jerry.
I didn't find anything about that specifically. The most curious one didn't have to do with the city, but in fact had to do with where I went to college. There's a building at my alma mater that is named after someone who was a segregationist. And when the university tried to undo the name, there were legal complications, and there's some sort of restriction that prevents them from changing the name. That's the closest thing that I could come up with that was similar to what you mentioned, but nothing like that. I would just say that there's not a ton of cities that have taken on this work, frankly, because this is an assumption I'm making, because it is something that usually happens informally. Oh, this person retired, we should do something to honor them, right? So not quite, to answer your question. But along the lines of some of the other discussion that you were having, I would just say that there are other ways that cities can honor staff. It's nice to get a plaque, things of that nature. There are other ways that cities take this. I think in Lake Oswego, there's the Unsung Heroes program that I think you told me about. So there's other conventions that can be pursued those are options.
So typically when buildings are named after a person, does it just continue in perpetuity until the building is torn down or something happens? Is that how it typically works with them?
So one thing in the policy, we do have it as if there's a petition to rename, it would come to council. But we didn't necessarily find something in our research that said we will revisit names every 5 years or anything like that. Martha may be able to speak to that.
And naming rights are now becoming big businesses for sports franchises and different things, which is different than city work, I think, in the sense that we're not asking for a $10 million. We're going to rename City Hall something for $10 million. I mean, like Moda Center. Right. But I think you do get into the situation where somebody has, I won't say they've gone past their useful name recognition, but it's maybe named for somebody, and as Jerry and I were talking before, people have no idea why maybe something was named. There's no plaque, there's no information about the person and how wonderful they were, and so sometimes you need to honor by giving the story, and how do you do that? And sometimes, like the Headleys have given so much to Lake Oswego, but sooner or later, I mean, I'm so far the oldest one on council, and I mean, I was pretty young when the Headleys, or I was older when the Headleys were recognized, and sooner or later people won't know the story of what the Headleys did, and then you walk down Headley Walkway and you're like, what's this all about? And so whether is there a time frame that you do put on things, I do kind of like the idea of saying the Lake Oswego Library or the Lake Oswego City Hall or the Lake Oswego Recreation, I mean, there's instead of calling it the Buck Center or the,
Winland Center.
Councilor Linden, if I could jump in, for those in the audience and listening and hearing tonight, if you would like to know about the Headleys or any other historical figures in Lake Oswego, please reach out to Councilor Verdick and the Historical Society. They have a great tour of historical houses, so you learn all that.
Right, they do. But I mean, sometimes that gets lost in the naming part, and so but I think you're right on. I like the idea, what you presented.
You're right, and
But on the topic of the, the timing of things, and so I guess if I guess it would bring us to the third question too, where for the naming rights, I'd say something where, because who knows if somebody were to put their name, sponsor, and pay a fee for make a donation to name, say it is the Lake Oswego Aquatic Center, right? And say it is an Oregon-based athletic company, for example. Does that mean that that's in perpetuity, that they have lifetime name rights? Or maybe we will say, after 10 years, maybe it's up available again, because I think that could be, if we're serious about different sources of revenue, maybe that could be help to fund some of the operational costs. I mean, I used to be in Seattle, for example. It used to be the King Dome, but of course that's been demolished. But that I can't keep track of how many times that it's Quest Field, or is it Safeco Field? And I know all these different, and so it's all these names. But those are the kind of things I know that will help to potentially, if there's a facility in town that might be appropriate for that. I'd like maybe that third topic.
So that's my line of work, is sports sponsorships, and what I can tell you is the seller of the rights, being Lake Oswego, would dictate the term of that agreement. It could be a year, it could be perpetuity, so.
Negotiated.
Let's not leave money on the table.
100%.
And if somebody wants to make up the 10 million that we're short for LORAC,
well, yes,
we might take a check.
Yes. Again, though, I think that is appropriate to handle on a case-by-case basis, because I think that you might do something different for different types of facilities.
Exactly. Okay, so what I'm hearing here is the practice continues along the lines of what you've outlined with this kind of process, starting at the council and going through, that city staff would be, as city manager Bennett described, for past, deceased, and if kind of for above and beyond, or life lost on duty. And that the sale of naming rights would be on a case-by-case basis and negotiated as such, which I don't think we've ever had. That's ever happened here.
We now have a policy that allows it.
But we do.
The what? Say again.
I said we'll have a policy that can allow it now.
That's right. Yep.
I think we answered the questions. I'll move forward. Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Does that also apply to sweeper trucks too?
Super trucks, no.
No, okay. All right.
That's named by the children.
Oscar, you're safe.
Oscar, you're safe, right? Does the other one have a name?
Sweet Caroline.
Yeah.
Sweet Caroline, that's right.
Sweet Caroline.
But is that on the side of? It is, okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's a street sweeper.
I like that name. I didn't know that. So Madison had mentioned that we had a meeting last week. That meeting, we invited Park and Rec Board, Historic Review Board, the DEI Board, and the Public Arts Council. Only members from the Public Arts Council showed up, but there are some questions that we wanted to bring to council related to city-owned public art. I can just read through those. Should the public art guidelines be modified to add a procedural step to have city council approve the criteria that will be used to commission a piece of public art? Should the naming policy concepts related to honoring identifiable people be applied to the depiction of individuals in the city-owned public art? That is, should public art allow for depicting individuals deceased and/or living, and if so, under what guidelines? And finally, should the City Hall mural selected as part of the current public art guidelines be completed?
So to provide more context on this part, so why we separated this into two policy discussions is, while these are separate, they are related, because what we're referring to as the public art is actually the Percent for Art program, which is our city permanent collection housed within our city facilities that's just funded through our capital project. So this is the art that you see at the maintenance center, our old city hall, this city hall, future of the LORAC, or the Lake Oswego Aquatic and Recreation Center. And so it is the art that is attached to our building in the sense of it's being funded through those projects. This is not to be
That's the 1.5%.
1.5%. So we wrote public art for the simplicity of this slide, but as outlined in the council report, we're only specifically talking about the 1.5% art, not the gallery without walls, not the rotating collection. This is permanently city-owned art as a part of our buildings. With that also being said, the reason why the two policy discussions intersect is because, as Jerry had in the first slide, the question is how do we honor individuals within our public spaces? And the public art as a part of the 1.5 are in our city-owned spaces. And when we move into the questions, we will go over the amendments if you would like that up on the slide, but we can at least start there.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
Well, I have some kind of, I like to think of kind of funny stories with the public art. And the first is right when I first became mayor. Someone emailed and they said, how on earth does this city have nude, decapitated people in the art? And I was like, what? And children are viewing this, and I thought, what on earth? And I had to think, I was like, oh yeah, they're talking about the Icarus display in Millennium Plaza Park, but they were just abhorred by it. And then even just today, one of my team members at Babico said, we need to add some plants inside. They're going on this whole thing about adding plants inside the building, and I love plants. I was like, okay. I'm like, what has you thinking of this? They say, well, for the jungle theme. I'm like, the jungle theme? Like, where do you think this has? Where did this restaurant get a jungle theme? They go, well, the elephant outside. I was like, okay. So anyway, the point being that the public art, throughout the town really adds a lot to the community character and is viewed by everyone in every which different way. So I know we have folks involved in the public art here, in the meeting, and I want to thank all of you because the beauty that you add, to the community, thought, provocation, and just enhancement of our civic life is really pronounced. I mean, we call Lake Oswego, well, it's not official, right? But what the city of art, is something that kind of an unofficial tagline, right? That we've adopted because of that. So this, like many of these other pieces of art, so we're going to we'll talk about the mural first, and this mural project is unique, and what I like best about it is it's only a mural that we would have here in Lake Oswego. I mean, the nature of it is very specific. It would not mean the same thing in a different in another community. So it's a uniquely Lake Oswego piece, and I think is also part of the reason why we're here tonight. Because whenever we have someone, a neighbor, a friend, someone we admire, in which I believe is a first. I do not know of any other piece of art where we've had a neighbor, a community member of ours, in it. So there's questions, that come up, not so much about the content itself, but making sure our neighbor is respected in the process. Questions like, has someone talked to the neighbor? Do they know do they like being in the piece? I mean, this is something going on the side of a building. We should check and make sure that they are good with that, because it's going to be up there, for a while. Kind of base level things that when this first came up, I was surprised that those things hadn't happened. But now we've gone through a process and we're here tonight. So I think when you just allow each other as neighbors to ask these questions, give each other space to kind of grow and widen a perspective, we engage in healthy dialogue, and we can take kind of questions, as an opportunity to expand, not to retract. And the more that we allow one another to share perspectives, safely, the more the very vision embodied in this mural will materialize. So, with that said, I very much we had a good group who followed a process, and I very much support, even though moving forward, even if we make tweaks to the existing process moving forward with this project as designed, and thank everyone for their good work on it. But I want to hear thoughts from my colleagues too. Councilor Boo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the mural for the City Hall mural for, has to be completed. And because I value the folks who work to select that mural, but also like one commentator said that art is, someone named their art. You cannot, it's unheard of that an artist make their piece of art and you come and change the name they gave to their art. I write my book and I call it, for example, My Life in Lake Oswego, and someone say, oh no, it should not be that. It should be Jungle Gym. We don't do that. Someone named their art, we have to respect the artist. And the other thing also is honoring folks in our community. It's something that's good. And it's an incentive for us as a people also to do well. And so I don't want to go into the gist of this thing, but this piece of art should be proudly displayed in our City Hall, and we all should be proud of that. And, we just have to understand that, that's how it is. Now, as far as we'll come to the answer, but, but for me, simple as that, we need to complete this piece.
Okay, complete?
Yeah.
Complete?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
We move forward with it.
So we're gonna go back to the top two questions. And so again, this is for council's approval of 1.5% being the city-owned permanent collection in city facilities as through the capital projects. Right now, if you want to hit the next slide, this is in our public art guidelines, and one of the public comments was that this was the wrong version, in which I will admit that is correct. We have a the Arts Council contract that was signed in 2019 had the wrong public art guidelines attached to it, which is what we were referring to. So we are going to do a cleanup and get the proper version signed, because the current version that we're operating under is from 2016, or should be operating in, which does not have a signed resolution attached. So we will clean that up on the staff per side. So with the update of using the 2016 public art guidelines, stage 1, where it says city council, that is already as a part of the process. What the amendments we are suggesting and asking for council feedback is adding to stage 4 and 5, which is then as the property owner related to the 1.5% art would have approval of the selection committee's final choice and the city council's final approval with the public art committee on the final artwork and delivery of it. That's what we're referring to.
So the current guidelines that we have to sign and include city council, include the language as written here for stage 1.
Stage 1, the expansion would be to stage 4 and 5.
I understand.
And part of this is also creating, again, mirroring the idea of the naming policy of having a process with the concept of honoring people going to city council. That is the intersection of city council would then be a part of this process along the way for city-owned assets being within city-owned buildings.
Right, which I think is, I mean, I think we're talking, I think one of the gentlemen testified that we wanted to start renaming the public or the outside art things, and I did not get that at all from this policy. I think we have a responsibility for the 1.5% fund as the buck does stop here, and I think we need to, council needs to provide some guidance because it is a public building with, oftentimes, we're aligned with, or we should be aligned with all groups within Lake Oswego, and it's a public building and it's the people's asset. And so I think it's a lot different than having the millennial whatever, or the Eucharist or whatever it is. And I think that's where art is wonderful. And I mean, hey, I was leading the charge to get additional funding for the Arts Council so that they could be sustainable when I carried the torch for council before you guys were all on. along with Daniel. And I think the arts community is one of our crown jewels. So I don't, and they do great work. But I do think that there is a process that I like your suggestion that we need to make sure that we're looking at as a council on a specific city-owned building, just to make sure that we're going down the right path, because it's, I guess I have concerns about if we put anything up on a building that is maybe controversial. And I think art can be expressed in so many different ways, but there's a different criteria, I think, when it comes to a public building that is all the people's building. And I think we need to ensure that we are inviting and we're welcoming to the building, and that people, maybe we don't have such a, maybe a controversial art piece. We have plenty of other outlets within Lake Oswego to have elephants or whatever throughout the building, but maybe to have it as part of the piece of the public, the building that we're talking about, like LORAC. I mean, are we going to do something more athletic? Or are we going to do something? We need to give some maybe direction that would be maybe conceptually to go along with the architecture and everything else. And I think, I don't think anywhere in here that says city council is going to be the selection committee 100%, but I think we do owe it to the taxpayers that we have some say in it. So I'm fine with that, and I think we are very supportive of the arts as a city and as a council. We fund a fairly big chunk of money every year to support the arts, and I would say that that's something that we continue because they've done a good job with that. And I think to Bill Tierney's point, it is about trust, and we need to have trust on both sides, and that's something that we have to develop, and I think this will ensure that we have trust. So, okay, that's my opinion.
Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Councilor Wynn?
I think the earlier question was if there's any guidelines. I would certainly think there needs to be guidelines, and this is a good start. And I think at minimum, I think if we're going to be depicting any individual, I think at the very least, we should probably find out if they're even aware of it, first of all, right? Because I think when we want to honor people, I mean, I know that there's certain communities, not certainly typically in, Western communities, putting somebody's name on a building is perhaps the greatest honor. But in other communities, it's not so much so. Singling out any individual for some sort of group accomplishment is not always the best way to honor people. So I think that although they may be well-intentioned, I think that I can think of instances where somebody in, for example, the Asian American community is chosen as the hero of this community, but they don't want their name on a building because they don't want to be, that they recognize that this is a group effort. And so we have to be mindful also too, although our intentions may be well to honor an individual or a group, but we should also be sensitive to the cultural aspects too, and how honor is prescribed based upon the cultural norms of particular groups. And I think that also reminds us to be thinking about and looking through a diversity lens, an equity lens too, on how we honor individuals. In some instances, it makes sense to honor somebody by naming a building. In other ways, it may not. And so that's, I think, that we shouldn't say, well, I hate to be a situation where you mean to depict somebody in a piece of art and you mean to honor them, but the person that has some semblance to that may not agree with that. But then one can argue, well, that's art, so they can put it up anyways. I know that we'd never go that far, but just want to build in something that, I think that's why we should have a little bit of oversight, not so much to quote unquote censure a piece of art, but I think just to be sensitive to some of the other unintended consequences of things we do.
Well, to that and we talked about featuring someone. It's a new thing, having a person, and I didn't see in the public art guidelines. I know we're kind of just talking about these specific items, but since we're talking about the guidelines in general, anything about just the process for ensuring that we would not want to put someone in art and have them be finding out about it at the unveiling, right? Or come back in 6 months and say, I changed my mind, I don't like how it looks or whatnot, right? I mean, that's an issue that we don't have when, it's whatever. So, Mr. Boone and I had talked about, you would typically in a process like this want to have the artist and the subject, would have a contract together, like a modeling contract would be kind of the most similar type of thing. But I don't see that in the guidelines anywhere. So there, just to make sure that I think as we go forward, even on this current project, we should make sure that these appropriate guidelines are being followed. So both our community member is being, respected, but then we're also being good stewards of the project, and we don't have things going up and down. Okay, does that sound good?
Well, also the other question, I guess, is we talked about a person being with us or not with us. I mean, is the mural part, I mean, and I'm just looking forward. Do we want people that are still with us, or are we, I mean, is that first criteria that we put in with this criteria? I mean, is that something that you're looking for as well?
That is a question for council. Yes, and it's a tough one. So
yeah, I don't know the answer, but I'm just asking. You kind of linked things together, and I didn't know whether we talked about right. And is there a vetting process for the person and so on, because they might pick somebody that it's all fine and dandy, and then you find out that you go into my history, and all of a sudden you find out that I should not be on the right. I should not be on any mural. So it's those things, I guess, are the kind of the criteria.
Yeah.
So
okay, we're gonna put that piece of it. Let's Councilor Raff and then Councilor Boone.
So I think the changes here are good. I think this is what we should do. I mean, I think we said it over here, but we are the fiduciary stewards of taxpayer money. And if we're talking about art paid for by our taxpayers on a building that's paid for the taxpayers, then we should approve it or be a part of that process like you've outlined, just like we are involved in the process for outlaying money for LORAC or the new golf course or roads and pathways. So to me, without our oversight, then it's just poor leadership. And so in addition, and I've said this, several months ago, I think the process for the acquisition or the process of selecting the artist for this mural, I don't think the process was the best process we could have used. And so I'm all for improving the process where we have, everyone is involved. And I think that's what you've done here makes me very happy and makes me feel very comfortable with how we're making those decisions. I think as it relates to honoring a person in art, alive or deceased, I think we should just follow the same process we approved with the naming of building rights. Just make it all the same. Again, to me, this has no. I'm fine with the mural as it stands. It was done. It was commissioned, and it's ongoing. Like, this is past that. So, but I see no issue with. I like the changes you've made here, and I think we should just have the rules for public art be the same as that for naming a building, and the person should be vetted for 3 years or whatever we decide on, and they should be deceased. It's just, again, you never want to get caught in an issue where you have to take a piece of art down. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Raff. Councilor Boone?
Yeah, I mean, we just have to think of what the public art, what is it for the city, and what are the people we commission to, because these are normally expert in their field. We have them, they're the art council, we contracted with them, and also the committee that can be different with the art. So if they choose a piece of art, I think it's done in really, like they're people who know what they're doing. So most of the time when it comes here, we say, yes, this is fine. It's if we consider that committee do we consider them as the boards we have? For example, in this meeting, we have the board say, hey, one of our members is leaving, we give Jason Dawn to be a replace, and we say, yes, we voted for us. I think it's it should not be taken like in a way that the council wants to take over everything. Council is part of the art council. We are, the gallery without art, I work with them and with the councillor verdict to, 2 years ago, and to see and we never said that we are going to oversee the gallery without wall. They do their stuff. But when we have our own art of the city, it's not about when we make decision, and that's what I was saying as a subject, the city has to be government, and government means that we use government function on bureaucracy, and that's unfortunately that way. Bureaucracy, if you go to the theories, of the bureaucracy, it has no name, no. So it's not the people out there that we are questioning, but it's something we put, no matter who comes, they have to follow the guidelines. But it's not because we have good people, good folks, because someday we can have a council that we have. I was reading right now that Kanye West said that the Jews should pardon Hitler. Those people there among us, one day they can be the majority in the art council and have Hitler's statue if we don't say, no, that's why I know I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, I give examples, and that's how it works. That's why we have guidelines. And I agree with this, that we oversee, we look and say, what is it about? If it's something that's insulting to, or that doesn't represent the values of Lake Oswego, we say, hey, no, we're not gonna accept this. That's it. We're not questioning the people who are over there. It's in 20 years, in 30, in 50 years, it's the guidelines we are putting. So I think you did a great job. It does not take the possibility. We say the council and the art committee. Most of the time we look and say, oh, this is fine. But if it's controversial, it means it is. Even if our name was not in that, if it's controversial, the council can say, hey, we're not gonna put this. So even if we don't put it, in some way we have the right to say, hey, there is this piece of art, we don't want it on our building, but it's still good to have it. So that's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with everyone in terms of that, the communication piece, and the role of the council. I think the question here is like, to what degree, right?
Yes.
To what degree? So I like, it seems very appropriate for the Public Art Committee to come to the council, when we have a 1.5%, and we can all recognize these are not everyday projects, right? It's few and far between that we have 1.5% for the art.
Our capital money is spent, so.
Yeah, exactly. And like in stage one here, come to the council. What is the budget? What is the site? What are the project goals? And then coming with also the selection committee, which per the public art guidelines is specific. I mean, we actually have very prescribed, public art guidelines. It's how we select people to be on the public art committee is very specific. How the selection committee is made up is also very specific. And I don't know different conversation for a different day, but we might want to be, think about that differently. But I think from that point on, for me, we leave it in that public art committee and the selection committee, where there's some overlap, but not entirely, hands to then implement those parameters that we have approved. I worry about at the very end of the process, having some kind of especially once things, just practically speaking, once art is created, to say, well, we don't know, we're not going to do this. We don't like it or whatnot. I mean, that's kind of, nonsense. So
So are you saying take out stage 5, but leave stage 4?
Yes, I'm for stage 1, which apparently as it exists, but isn't followed.
And stage 4?
And that's it. And then the process goes forward. I do think that one of the issues we have here, today is that while we do have, and we heard input, on this, that we have this public art process that is detailed and has council involvement and all of this, but I think we can also recognize that this process is not being followed, well. And even the fact that we don't even have the right, public art guidelines in the report, that we haven't signed off on the right guidelines, I mean, it just exemplifies the fact that there's a real disconnect between what's going on with the arts council and the public art committee, and there's just a disconnect in general. And it's not to point fingers or anything, but just I think there's a cleanup that we can do and really look at how can we get back to how this process is really supposed to work. How are we making sure that there is an open public process, even in preparation for this meeting? I go to see, well, what's taking place at the public art committee? I don't know, because there's no minutes posted for meetings. There's no minutes posted for selection committee meetings. I mean, I can't even access information, and that should be accessible to every member of the community. So I think there is a lot more we can do to be more accessible in the process, more transparent, and more inclusive. And I looked at the time that meetings took place for these processes. I mean, this is not an inclusive process. So there's good things that good work is being done, and it's not to take away from that, but there's ways that we can definitely make it better. There's always opportunities to do better, of course. So my suggestion would be to, stage 1, clean this up.
I think I'm more comfortable with stage 4. I mean, I'm fine with not stage 5, because once they can do it. But I think, well, I think in stage 4, it's just really that they've already made the selection, whatever, and then that's one last double check before the artist starts on anything. So, it's the last thing, but anyway.
Okay, so Councilor Wendland and Councilor Raff like stage 4, or stage 1 and stage 4.
Yeah, I think that this is, well, you said, don't change, don't include stage 5.
I agree with stage 5. That's kind of like it's the barn. Yeah, the barn's been built.
Sorry there.
But I think before, it's kind of like going through DRC is stage 4.
Right.
So,
okay.
Before anything's done, we just take a quick peek and see what's there, and then, and folks, this is like the number of capital projects that we have on our agenda for the next 10 years is pretty limited, so.
Well, and I'll say, too, I think that if we do have when it comes to the question about, should the naming policy concepts related to honoring and identifying people using city art, I like leaving the process open. I don't like closing it off, to anything, saying, well, absolutely no people, but if our intent is to display people, that should be stated in the parameters, and
right,
it would be a stage 1. I think it's good to be, because that's kind of one of the issues. We want to make sure we're equitable. People say, well, how does this person show?
The earliest possible, so they know about it.
Yeah, so it should just be an open process. But if that's the intent of that particular, that's great. That's great, as long as we run a good, a good process. But okay, so that's on the naming. That's just for me on the naming. What do you?
I agree that the naming here, like we did the first section. Oh, thank you for putting my microphone on. I am with Councilor Wendland in the sense that I think we should leave stage 5. I think it's a
4. You mean?
It's 4 and 5.
Oh, 4.
Is that what you were saying?
I'm just 4.
Just 4.
5 is
okay.
It's done.
Then I'm fine with that. I think as long as we have, it'll never happen, I know, but I'm a nerd, so it's like, would we ever be concerned that after we approve something in stage 4, it comes back and it could be drastically different and we're stuck with it?
No, it's the artist.
Well, it's artist and artwork.
Yeah, the artist, and then, yeah.
Are we concerned about that? Just,
yeah.
They haven't done the piece yet. They do caricatures or whatever. They have
But we approve something, yeah,
so
this looks great, and then the final one comes through, and it's.
And actually, I think it's nice public process for people to see what we're doing, so that things just don't all of a sudden arrive.
But why should we choose an artist because there's an art thing. I mean, we can think of the final product, but an artist, there's an art committee, they choose the artist they want. Why? Like, I don't even know this artist. Why would I have, oh, you choose someone, I have to look at it. I was thinking it was the artwork, but
I think it should be art and artwork, because if we remember when we first were briefed on the artist for this mural, it was discovered that the artist is pretty defiantly anti-police. So it was that
and
was a situation where
it's a good an artist can artists can be anti-police. This is normal. We are in a society where people we are in America. Come on,
so
man.
we all discuss it.
The First Amendment, folks can be anti-police. It's their right.
Right.
We cannot just say,
I'm not
oh,
saying we
he's
can't do it.
anti-police. We're not going to.
We're not saying that. We're not saying that.
Okay, then.
So we know about it.
Yeah,
So
but
we're aware of
but why should we know about what the artist? An artist is an artist. Art is they're provocative. Artists are provocative. They're here in the society to challenge us.
Okay,
And
what if
that's
they put
the
up-
role of an. It's not. That's why I'm not an artist. You are not.
So our police officers
No, we don't know.
work in the building.
We're off topic on
So
this.
I'm just saying-
What do you, so
We're- I
let's
think we're
go
all
to the
saying same thing.
stages.
It's just having some.
Yeah, but we should not change. It's like, oh, someone is against Masan, we should not have. They can be against me, I don't care. I continue to do what I have to do. It doesn't mean that we are gonna eliminate them because they're against me.
Right, but I'm your coworker, and if
Yeah.
someone wanted to put a painting on the city hall that mocked
We're diverging
you,
too much. I mean, I've allowed you guys to talk. I've put me in line, and we've had this conversation. I've been very patiently waiting for my turn to
Let's
speak.
just stick to the.
No, that's why I'm saying,
What do you-
for me, we have, there's an art committee that is here. They're looking for the artist. The main concern is the product. And that's what you're saying. If we had a piece of art that's mocking our city manager or someone that was, or the police, like saying they're good to.
Can you,
Can
just
I
be
just,
explicit?
can I just say something? I think will help. I understand that Councilor Nguyen has something to say. The mural is an exception in terms of how it was picked, where they picked the artist first, and then the artist went and developed the concepts. Usually when the Arts Council gets proposals for a piece, the artist who's proposing gives them ideas of the actual piece. And so if all pieces were like the mural, then you would actually want to be somewhere between stage 4 and 5, but most pieces are not, or more like The Land Remembers, where when you get the proposal, the artist tells you what their vision for the space is. So I actually think stage 5 is way too late, right? The piece is already done. So I do like the idea of taking you out at stage 5, but stage 4, when you have a concept, and I will also say there have been one or two times where the Arts Council has come to council when they were sort of at stage 4 and sort of given you a progress report. And so essentially, if we treat that like a progress report, it's not really any different than the flourish sculpture. They came and showed you the concept before it was even built. So I don't really think this is a change in practice. It's just formalizing it as a step.
Maybe more consistent practice.
And they show us if we think it's derogatory or something, we say, no, we won't have this. But we have to respect also
Okay, Councilor Nguyen, thank you for your.
Thank you. I'm feeling that instead stage, I'd like to see it at stage 3, because I think that, certainly I want to be able to make sure that we're allowing, the artists, because I think about this way, we're charging the Arts Commission, and we're also, we want to bring the free flow of ideas. I think a lot of ways where, for example, we ever commission any sort of like the City Hall project or some of these large projects, we want to be able to keep the creative juices flowing, see what comes out of the process. We know some ideas may not even come to fruition, but I think I don't want to stifle the creative process. But I also want to be able to have some options early enough so that we don't go too far down one path with one particular artist that it takes time and energy. I know that people don't go into art to become rich. And I think that that's something we have to recognize, is that people spend a lot of time and energy doing this, and it's a passion. So I think that we need to be involved early enough in the process that we provide them guidance, say, hey, is it going to be worth the while to continue it? but also provide some guidance in a way that allows them to have some really, the end result is we want to have creativity, we want to have good art that's produced, within certain parameters. I don't want to be in a place where we're censoring artists and types of art because of other things, but coming up to a certain point where we have, choices where we're able to figure out maybe there's different alternatives that can be presented to us. And so my feeling is that getting to stage 4 almost feels like it's we're being presented with a final choice and we're just rubber stamping it. I want to be able to get in early enough so that we can provide some direction to staff and say maybe this is this particular art maybe not, it's appropriate for this, or maybe we can think of another way to put this, or maybe there's a different venue. Who knows? But I think that we need to provide some direction to the artists to see if they're on the right path, and because you get to the final point where there's a final selection, they spent 6 months doing this, and then find out.
No, that's too late, right?
So I'm thinking stage 3 is where we need to.
So what I'm hearing that there's, okay, well, I know Councilman Booth, but I know, I agree with, but what I'm hearing from the 3, that there's some beyond stage 1, you like some additional.
Like Senator
City Manager Bennett, that is not necessarily a good.
It's not even 10 o'clock yet. I mean, no, I think that this is a natural check-in, just like we do on almost every project.
I think, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just want, on stage 5, what typically happens is the contract is written up that says there has to be a conceptual plan that people sign off. That's more like 4, okay? And so people sign off on that. Stage 5, upon completion of the artwork, that's where the art committee gets together and says, well, this is what this is the conceptual, and this is what you've got.
Yeah.
Now, it better be darn close, because otherwise we're not going to pay you. I mean, because, that's what we bought, is what the conceptual was. There can be shading differences, we thought it'd be more vibrant blue, whatever, type thing. So stage 5 is really just the conformance so that there's not a substantial amendment of what was in conceptual.
Okay.
So.
And let me make one more suggestion, because I hear what you're saying, Councilor Wynn, but you do have 2 council liaisons to the Public Art Committee, and there's always at least one city representative on the selection committee. And so maybe there is something that's not a formal action of the council, but maybe a report from either your liaisons or your staff person to the council if we feel like it's, if there's a piece that's headed down the wrong track. I hesitate to have, I hear the Arts Council's concern about interruption of the flow, and at stage 3, they're often, they might be looking at 5 or 6 proposals, they might be doing deep interviews with the artists. There's just a lot of work there that I don't know that is really a valuable use of council time. And so maybe there's another way to accomplish.
I think, stage 4, I think you set it up, because that's the time when the selection committee is making the final choice, and that's, it's just a check in the process, and all it is a review.
Well, I do think there'd be a marked difference if we were following the practices as they're supposed to be, and the council liaisons were engaged on the public art, committee, and there was an inclusive process around the creation. I think it would be, and again, we have to remember, we have been implementing this program for a long time with great success, so we have to, that matters.
Let's talk about the wood piece in City Hall that is up there, the, whatever they call it, we had updates on that. That was, I felt that was very helpful for council to have.
More communication.
Yeah.
So again, I think the typical process is more like that than it was in the mural, and a lot of that, it was just how the mural process got created by how the artist was picked, and then when the artist started to do their conceptual work. So again, I think you should treat that as the exception and the land remembers as more of the rule. And let's make sure we unpack the processes that have worked and document the processes that have worked, as opposed to high centering on the process that was not the norm.
Exception. Right. Well, we're going to come back with these guidelines, and so I think that gives, I'm not seeing, robust consensus in particular, but in general,
Yeah, we are. We're going to, I think we're
No,
pretty
but
close.
the concern is that like
close.
the Art Council and these folks, there have never been a moment when City Council questions their decision that I know of. I have never seen. So
Well, I think
why is it like all of a sudden that we are coming? No, if there is any matter you can tell me I've never heard of.
Well, I think that,
I mean, if there's have been, I mean, it's.
Well,
I think it's the fact that there was a person on the art proposed for the side of City Hall caused us all to take a breath, and I think the mayor outlined the reasons why earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's why I say they're happy. We have to oversee what they're doing, but like saying stage 1, 2, 3.
No, I agree. I think
so why then do we have an art committee? Why we're not doing it to the other board and other things? They do their work, and it's at the end that we look what they're doing.
No, I know. You made your perspective very clear. I agree with you.
Yeah,
but let's take the feedback that we've heard tonight and
No, I think you all have been pretty clear that we're gonna continue with stage 1. We will suggest that you add a step in stage 4, and then we're gonna take a hard look at the rest of the guidelines to make sure that we're clear. I think the issues around naming, what I heard, is that in general, when we're talking about stage 1, you probably want the same principles. That's what I mean. I'm sorry. The same principles as we outlined about people in the naming policy. Right. You want them at least to be discussed at stage 1 so that if people are going to be represented, that's clear from the very beginning of the art piece that that's where we're headed. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Is that kind of where we're headed?
I think some of it comes down to how hard of a check-in it is. So I mean, is it here's what we're thinking, or is it a, resolution on the, and it's, yay or nay, check-in, communication.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, you put it in policy so people follow it, and it's, this is not really that, this is not brain surgery, folks.
Well, it's good to, no.
If they're going through the selection process with the selection committee, they've already have the presentation. So, and we go through this on just about everything else we spend money on.
Okay.
I mean, and this is big money.
And I guess the other thing I would say, and this is something that we'll talk about and talk to Arts Council as well, is I think that part of the challenge with some of these larger capital projects is we don't necessarily make one RFP, one selection. And so sometimes there's a long lag between stage 1 and the rest of the process. And so maybe the other thing we can make sure we're talking about is how do we have ongoing communication? Because probably the criteria for City Hall was set before City Hall even opened, and now 2 years later, we're dealing with the last piece of public art, and so probably we've all forgotten what we decided back in 2020.
Different councils too.
And there was a pandemic and some other things that happened, and so probably the other thing that we ought to do is figure out how to structure routine communication so that so that the decisions we make are not forgotten.
Right. This was a $600,000 budget for this building. Okay, so these are not small numbers, folks. We're not talking about a $5,000 canvas. We're talking about significant money that the taxpayers have paid through bonds or through budgets, and I think that's our fiduciary responsibility, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, at the end, we check it out.
Okay, thank you.
And I have never told an artist what to do.
Good discussion.
So we'll be back in December for the naming policy adoption. We will come back at a later unscheduled date for the public art guidelines cleanup.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. and Jerry. Thank you both. Good work on this. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Okay. Council business. So we have our first item here on the council business is our adoption of findings conclusion order for, this is for AP 22-05 and LU 22-0041. This was the appeal. We had the other meeting on the Development Review Commission's decision to approve a minor variance for design variances in a development review permit at 525th Street.
I move to adopt the findings, conclusions, and order on AP 22-05.
Second? Second. Second from Councilor Raff. Okay, is there any discussion? Councilor, when you're abstaining from this because you were absent from the meeting, yes? You're abstaining from this vote, right? Because you're okay. Okay.
Are you sure?
No. You were no. Okay, so very good. Any other discussion here? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Well, shoot, excuse me. Let's do the votes. Let's do the voice vote since it's all over the place. Sorry.
Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilor Wendland,
Yes.
Councilor Nguyen is abstaining, Councilor Raup,
Yes.
and Councilor Mbu.
No.
Okay, motion passes.
Can we, is it a majority? Do you need 4 votes?
You need a majority of those present and eligible to vote.
Oh, okay.
So we're good.
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
311 is the outcome.
Next, we have ordinance 2903, which is our psilocybin-related businesses.
Which agenda number?
Within the city. And are we going to, Mr. Boone?
Well, I can
Give us a brief
summarize, I
rundown.
suppose, for you, what I have in my council report on my contact with the Oregon Health Authority, and I have made a recommendation, to you. My contact with the Oregon Health Authority was with the policy analyst, which is not binding upon the Oregon Health Authority. So the first question I had was, when they say distance from schools, I raised the question about what is this 500 feet with a physical or geographic barrier? He tells me the way they interpret that is a body of water or an interstate freeway or something sort of massive, as opposed to a door, a fence, a gate, something like that. So that's the way they interpret it. That is based on their interpretation on the marijuana provision. So there's at least some legislative history on that one. If this does get referred, time, place, and manner ordinance, I would recommend being clearer on that. Then we have the issue about you can't be located within, or a service center cannot be located within 1,000 feet of a school, public or private, okay? Which is exclusively, that's one, or which is in an area zoned exclusively for residential use. Okay? Now, we've provided attachment 5 to the staff report, which has the rings around schools that have been identified with the Department of Education as being either a public or private school. There could be others, so don't take that as written in stone because schools are not necessarily required, private schools are not necessarily required to file. So, all the yellow you see is the areas that are zoned residential. Now, as I indicated in my staff report, is that an area which is zoned exclusively for residential use? No. Residential use allows the conditional use, except in the RW zone, the Cabana zone, offices by a conditional use. So that's, one could make the argument it's not an area exclusively zoned for residential use. However, for the Oregon Health Authority to process an application, they're going to require a land use compatibility statement, also a LUX, it's called, from the planning department. And I think our planning department would say that if you don't already have a conditional use that you've gone through the process to obtain, then the answer on that LUX to the Oregon Health Authority would be that that area is not permissible for a license there. So, again, if a time, place, and manner is going to be referred by the council to develop, it would be good to clarify that what zones, residential zones, if any, or mixed-use zones would be permissible for service centers. For example, a mixed-use zone has commercial and residential, and so maybe you want to have it. You don't want to have a service center in the residential use of the mixed use, but commercial might be okay. There may be some issues there to deal with. The other issue on the timing, basically the way the measure, which became statute, was adopted, it said that Oregon Health Authority looks at the time of establishment of the facility. So they're going to look for a Lux statement at the time when the application is being approved. They're not going to look back on it when it's renewal time. They consider they're done because that's when local government has its chance, is at the time of establishment. So if an application is received and approved, and then we put in a prohibition ordinance, okay, that application, and a Lux, if it's received, a Lux statement is issued saying it's okay, and our license is issued, and then we adopt a banning ordinance, a temporary prohibition or a permanent prohibition to the next election. That's going to stand for that business. At the time of renewal of that business, even if we have an ordinance in place, Oregon Health Authority will renew the license for that facility. From a license point of view, they only look at the time of establishment. Okay? Also, if we've issued a Lux statement that said it met land use standards at the time it was issued, we have our own land use non-conforming provision, which says if you were lawfully established at the time, but we changed the ordinance to say you're no longer lawfully established, you have a right to continue. That's an existing provision of the non-conforming provision. So unless something were to change on that non-conforming provision, a licensed and established business would continue to operate even after adoption of a prohibition ordinance. So, okay, so there's a grandfathering effect, if you will. That's a little different, I think, on the issue of hours. If we were to adopt, if you get a license, there's nothing in the statute that talks about, well, it says your maximum hours are 6 a.m. to midnight. I think that's what it is, 6 a.m. to midnight. If we adopt an ordinance later that says, I'm going to say 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. type of thing, they're going to get the license to operate, okay? The statute is the maximum hours, and there's nothing under the hours which is a land use component, so the grandfathering effect doesn't apply there. And you would have made in your time, manner, and place ordinance a finding that it is reasonable to adopt some hours limitation sort of as a police power. So I think that could be that. So even though you had a business that got a license and they were established and that sort of stuff, if we then adopted a later time, manner, and place ordinance, I think they would have to comply with the hours limitation. So with that background, I'll be happy to answer any questions. My recommendation is I think there are some, if there's any concern about time, manner, and place, then we want to put in, I recommend the version 2A, the cleaned up version, okay, as a temporary prohibition until you adopt a time, manner, and place ordinance. And then I indicated that there should be in your motion as to what priority the planning department should give in running it through the process. I do think that if you're going to have a time, manner, and place, if you want to restrict time, manner, and place, you want to do that before licenses are issued.
And I guess I would only add one thing is that in talking with Director Siegel, his recommendation and request to all of you is that you be as specific as you can about where you do want to allow this, because that'll expedite the development of the ordinance. So the more clear you can be tonight, the faster it'll go in terms of the policymaking process.
And Director Siegel is on Zoom.
Oh, thank you, Scott. I'm glad you're here. You can say that yourself, Scott.
Oh, thank you. I won't repeat what you just said. I agree with what you just said. However, is that, and City Attorney Pro Tem Boone.
Let's hope for deputy soon.
Yeah. Mentioned that with the conditional use permit, this would be allowed in residential zones, although I think, Mr. Boone, that's limited to historic landmarks in residential zones, of which we have fewer than 100, but still there is that ability. The more significant issue or question that I have for you all is, typically we would consider, counseling or acupuncture or any number of personal services as a home occupation. You know, we do permit home occupation. I mean, we allow home occupations that are office uses, that are personal service uses, that are, of course, limited in scope and, you know, scale, that they're compatible with the neighborhood. But it just raises a question in my mind as to how would we handle that if we didn't have, you know, clear policy direction on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, let me ask everyone, I mean, but to me, when we hear them, when the measure says, when it says this should be limited or should not be allowed in residential areas. I mean, I think residential areas, and yet, you know, now we have the fact though that we allow as a conditional use non-residential uses in residential areas here. But I believe the intent, you know, the measure was that it wouldn't be in purely residential areas, irregardless of these conditional, you know, uses. But who knows? I think the point is that it's unclear, and that's kind of the reason why it's good to go through the process. But I mean, is everyone agree that it'd be good to clarify not in the residential areas?
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, so we're talking. So when we talk about the fence posts, giving this direction to Director Siegel, we're talking commercial areas where we would see other service businesses situated.
Right, with parking lots.
So even in a mixed use establishment, it would be in the commercial component of that mixed use establishment, not in the residential component. Okay.
If I understand.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Evan, it's not allowed. There's no conditional use permit allowed for the use of the psilocybin.
Well, there would be a conditional use allowed, and maybe I think Director Siegel is correct. Is that if you had a historic property that was a provision that said that tried to facilitate, restore, or retain historic properties by expanding the types of uses. So historic properties can provide for office uses with a conditional use permit. So if I had an historic house, then I could apply for conditional use to have an office in there. Now, conditional use standards are, you know, you have to show the compatibility of the neighborhood. So that's kind of the same question you're going to face on the time, manner, and place analysis as well.
Okay, so.
And also school, what do they define as school?
The statute.
And what about homeschooling?
No,
no, it doesn't include homeschooling.
Oh, okay. That's good.
No, I
think it says, you know, leading to a certified, certificated educational program. So I think DOE, or Department of Education, whatever it's called now, they should have an accurate list for what this is. But I just don't want to set in stone that map.
Right.
No.
Can I make a motion?
So, Councilor Ralph.
Oh, go ahead.
He was first.
I mean,
go.
If you'd like to.
No, go.
Okay.
Go.
I'd like to move to enact ordinance 2903, option 2. Is that right, 2A?
2A.
Yeah, 2A is the cleaned up version.
2A is cleaned up version. Do I need to read the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. An ordinance of the city of Lake Oswego declaring a temporary prohibition on psilocybin-related businesses within the city, and further direct staff to commence preparation of a time, place, and manner ordinance for council consideration in July of next year, 23. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. No discussion now. So we're given direction on the place. Now, do we want them to look anything into time? No time.
No,
we don't do.
I think we need to give the community at least the. I mean, if we're moving forward to this, and I think it's a good thing, but we have some housekeeping to do, and I think to your point, it should be in commercial areas, narrowed down so that it's not in people's neighborhoods.
I also think it's hard to do time when it's such a hard. For those who don't know, it might be a hard thing to kind of put a framework on, right? So, yeah.
So is that good, Director Siegel? So we're really just talking place. Oh, maybe he's gone.
Well, I mean,
Mayor, you can't. Yes, I'm hearing that you're wanting to focus on commercially zoned lots, and yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Well, I think our focus, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just to clarify some of what is ambiguous, in the measure. We're not looking to establish, a scheme of a bunch of restrictions on this business. We're looking just to clarify kind of the intent of the measure, keep it out of the residential areas and allow it where other similarly situated commercial businesses are.
Correct.
Yeah. Just so that's clear with the Planning Commission.
And if I can, just on the time question, we don't obviously establish any time requirements in the commercial zones. I mean,
yeah.
Okay. So if we were to establish them, we would have to show that there's a reasonable basis for doing so. So the question is, do you want the Planning Commission to look for that, or just let it be with other commercials?
Theoretically, it's an indoor treatment.
It is an indoor service center, yes.
Service center. Yeah. Right, but I guess what I am saying, but let's just say they rent a room from the place up here, the Irish bar, whatever, and then they can use the outside. I mean, are we saying that this has to be inside? In other words, right, I mean, can they have outside treatment centers?
I'd have to look at the rules on that, but if we're going to do that anyway, I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
I think the intent is not to allow outside treatment centers. Now, of course, people may want to sit outside in a patio. That's,
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But good question.
Right.
Okay. So we've had, I think that, Director Siegel, is there anything else we should clarify?
Well, I just wanted to get your feedback on a process. So when we went through the time, place, and manner regulations for marijuana, there was a lot of community input. I look at that a lot differently because that had a retail component, dispensaries and retail. This is not a retail establishment. This is more like a medical office type of use. And so I think there's a need, however, for education and just more information on what this is and how it operates so that the public can, one, be informed, and then also, the Planning Commission can get through this, effectively. So what I have in mind is, perhaps a community, a panel or some sort of event where we could invite experts, perhaps someone from the industry who's knowledgeable on the policy and the legislative history on it, perhaps someone who's a clinical psychologist, or some people who can actually speak intelligently about this, because I know I can't.
To the Planning Commission?
Yeah, to the Planning Commission, or a panel, right, that would be under the auspices of the Planning Commission, but would be, community.
Right, of course.
I would suggest that we have our public safety officers there as well. I mean, both from fire and police if there's any situation where if they're called into, just so that they can put, and I know that there's probably not a ton of, and could be under the dome. So,
it's a mushroom top, so,
that would be.
They could have outdoor, under the rules, outdoor would be possible.
We'll get you first access to the clinic so you can, fully understand the process.
Sure.
I missed this whole discussion with you guys. I wish I was here.
And we wish you were here too.
Director Siegel, I think that's a great idea. We even, just us as a council, we learned so much in the short time. We had someone before us, so we really appreciated it, and I think a lot of community members would appreciate the same.
Right.
I think, let's just make sure he's got, is there anything else, Director Siegel? Is there anything else, Director Siegel?
No, thank you. Appreciate the feedback on that.
All right. Okay, well, then let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Good job. Director Siegel, thank you. Mr. Boone, thank you. Okay. All right, now we have information. Any information from council? Nope. Okay. That's about it. Nothing? All right, everyone, it was a good meeting. Thank you all for being here. Good job. We got it done. 9:12. We didn't think we'd make it. Streamlined. Yeah, we are adjourned.
Councilor Wen, there's just one more.